Chapter 3909. The gigantic sword was about to cleave down. Once it cleaved down, the old man would probably be cleaved into two. Dog leading. He didn't know if the grand-uncle wanted the whole tree or the roots. With the roots, it could still sprout and grow back. The roots of such a huge tree would definitely be spectacular. Even if they gave up the trunk, they could still take the roots. But he didn't know if the old man would still be around. So ruthless. This was equivalent to exterminating an entire family. The old man from the divine tree obviously realized this as well, and his face turned ugly. Ning Shu whispered to the old man, "They're a bunch of fugitives. They'll do anything." The old man rolled his eyes at Ning Shu. "Do you want me to give in to them?" "Why?" Ning Shu was scolded again. "Then fight with them. Fight back." "Why are you scolding me?" This old man, the cubs were trembling in fear at this scene. They huddled together and looked at the grand-uncle in horror. Some of the cubs wanted to attack, but the disparity in strength between the two sides was too great. It was useless to do anything. They could only lick their desserts or eat their meat. They silently watched as the cubs were about to be destroyed. The foundation of the cubs was the tree of God. If the tree of God was gone, the cubs would cease to exist. Some of the more sentimental cubs even shed tears. They ate while crying, sniffling and sniffling. The old man saw that the giant sword was about to land. He let out a heart-wrenching cry. "Stop! Can't we trade? You don't even allow people to bargain when doing business." Ning Shu was speechless. "Then you were dawdling before because you wanted to bargain. You really failed. Why didn't you just say it directly? Why did you have to twist the topic into something else? You made people misunderstand that you didn't want to trade and used force." He was drunk. The grand-uncle kept his sword expressionlessly. "Why didn't you say so earlier? I want your roots even more." The old man's face darkened. "I knew you were up to no good. You just want my roots. You're a despicable bandit. Shameless." Ning Shu also felt that if the tree of God continued to resist, the Grand Elder would take this opportunity to dig out the roots of the tree of God. He was indeed quite shameless. The tree of God had an ugly expression on his face as he took a bigger branch from his body and gave it to Grand-uncle. He was afraid that if the branch was too small, Grand-uncle would be dissatisfied and remove his roots. Compared to the roots, a few branches could still be sacrificed. This was the so-called window effect. You want to open the window, but the people in the house don't agree. At this time, if you want to flip the house, the others will definitely agree to you opening the window. Under the coercion and temptation, what else could the old man do but compromise? The grand-uncle and the others might get a bigger branch than expected. The strong could really do whatever they wanted. Especially when the grand-uncles and the others looked like hooligans. It was really worrying. The old man's face turned ugly. His hands trembled as he gave the branch to grand-uncle and the others. Sang Liang took the branch with a smile and said, "Thank you, old man." "Old man divine tree, ha 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 ha." A series of mocking laughter came out of his mouth. He had already gotten what he wanted. Did he care about the old man's attitude? Of course he didn't. Sang Liang kept the branch and handed a piece of soil to the old man. "This is the soil you wanted." The old man rolled his eyes and took the soil. He checked the soil and saw that the two of them were still here. He ordered them to leave. "The deal is over. What are you still doing here?" Did they still have some improper thoughts about his roots? Shameless, bah, bah, bah. The grand-uncle turned and left without any intention of chatting. Sang Liang said to the old man, "Then we'll leave. Take care of yourself. We'll come and see you in the future." The old man waved his hand as if he was sending off a plague. "Hurry up and leave. Don't come back in the future. I don't even want to see you. Sang Liang also left. The old man's face revealed a smile. He weighed the soil in his hand and buried it under his body. He dug a hole, buried it, and then filled it up. His happy expression didn't look like he was at a disadvantage at all. Ning Shu, you're both movie emperors. As for who's at a disadvantage and who's at an advantage, who can say for sure? Ning Shu asked, what is this? The old man patted the soil on his hand. I'm a tree. Trees need soil. Soil is also very good. Clearly, this palm-sized piece of soil was good stuff. The old man hummed a tune with his hands behind his back. Ning Shu felt that this guy was really taking advantage of her. Previously, he looked like he was being forced and was doing all sorts of things. Seeing that the matter was over, the cubs that were hiding in the corner trembling while eating also ran out. They regained their previous liveliness and chattered around the old man. Old man Shinshu was very patient with these cubs. After a while, these cubs dispersed. Ning Shu took advantage of the old man's good mood and asked, Old man, can I try to comprehend the divine pattern now? Since he was already here, he might as well fight for it. The old man nodded. Okay. He was very straightforward. Ning Shu didn't believe it. It seemed like the old man got what he wanted. That's why he was in such a good mood. What was that piece of soil? Ning Shu entered the old man divine tree's spiritual space, which was filled with densely packed lines, causing people to be dazzled. Ning Shu couldn't even grasp a single line. He couldn't capture the trajectory of these lines. Ning Shu closed his eyes and used his mental power. When he felt that he had checked enough, he reached out to grab the line. However, the line slipped away from Ning Shu's hand. He had already caught it, but why did it still slip away? Time's up. Ning Shu was expelled from the spiritual space. Why was it so fast? He felt that he hadn't even comprehended much and the time was up. Ning Shu bid farewell to the old man and left the sacred ground. Since he had nothing to do, he prepared to participate in the Arbor Day. After getting the branch, Tai Shu and the rest would definitely plant the tree beside the Law Sea. Ning Shu excitedly went to the Law Sea. The branch had already been planted. It quickly grew into a small tree. Ning Shu walked closer to take a look. He saw that the small tree was emitting a luster. There were some faint lines. Obviously, these lines would become divine patterns in the future. For the Law Sea, Tai Shu and the rest had used all sorts of methods. It was just that the Law Sea had been dormant for a long time. Planting the divine tree was just a consolidating effect. Moreover, it was just a theoretical state. As for how effective it actually was, no one knew. The grand-uncle and the others stumbled and stumbled. They used both folk prescriptions and prescriptions. Ning Shu watered the divine tree. This way, he could be considered to have participated in the Arbor Day and contributed to the Green Law Sea. To view the new chapter, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3910. Ning Shu was wondering if he should plant a tree for the peerless martial art. Planting a tree could stabilize the vegetation and prevent landslides and mudslides. Here, it was the same logic. It could stabilize the world. The only problem was that he couldn't find that kind of mud. If he asked the old man, he would probably only have 2 words, scram. He didn't know what kind of mud it was. If he could find it, he might be able to exchange it with the old man. Ning Shu touched the sapling. Under his touch, the sapling actually grew a little. The leaves also stretched out a little. Ning Shu was so scared that he immediately retracted his hand. He looked around but didn't see anything. Ning Shu looked at his transparent hand. It was really the hand of God. Just touching it could make the sapling grow. This guy must be absorbing his vitality. Ning Shu leaned closer to the sapling and whispered to the old man, "Old man, it's you. Can you answer if you hear me?" It was a branch from the old man's body. It was equivalent to the old man's main body. He wondered if this sapling was interesting. The sapling swayed with the wind but didn't respond to Ning Shu. It seemed that after leaving the main body, the sapling had become an independent divine tree. It might grow very big in the future. This tree should be the old man's descendant. Ning Shu kept calling out to the tree. When the grand-uncle came over and saw the strange Ning Shu, he grinned expressionlessly. His eyes flashed with disgust. Ning Shu saw that the grand-uncle came over and stopped talking to the divine tree. He looked at the endless black sea of law. Occasionally, there would be a popping sound, rippling out layers of ripples. The grand-uncle probably didn't like having someone around him. He said, "Why aren't you leaving?" Ning Shu retorted, "I can't come to this place. The organization has rules. I can't come to this place." She could go wherever she wanted. If she had the ability, she could write, "Ning Shu can't enter." Even if she did, she would still come. The grand-uncle ignored Ning Shu and looked at the sea of law in a daze. After a while, he said to the black fish in the sea of law, "You don't have to do it. Go back." Two black fishes with flowers leaped from the surface of the sea. Ning Shu simply couldn't bear to watch. The beautiful koi fish turned from red and white to gray, then from gray to black, and from black to flower. It was simply terrifying. Swimming in such a sea was simply a disaster. He didn't know how much black pigment the two koi fish had absorbed. But grand-uncle wanted to absorb power from such a sea of law. Was he absorbing power or trash? That was debatable. The two black fishes came ashore and turned into humans. They were as black as Africans. They were as ugly as they were handsome before. The two koi fish spat out the dirty things in their mouths and said to the grand-uncle, "You have to do what you promised us." The grand-uncle nodded, and the two fishes left. The grand-uncle glanced at Ning Shu in annoyance. "You leave too." Ning Shu nodded and didn't move. He stared at the sea of law. The grand-uncle turned to look at him. Black lines spread out from his neck. "You forced me to make a move." Ning Shu glanced at him. "You stand over there, and I stand here. How am I in your way?" The grand-uncle sneered. "What are you doing here? You think you're loyal and righteous. You came to take a look at this sea of law that is about to be ruined. There's a limit to your hypocrisy. I asked you to do something, and you looked like you wanted to die. Now you're pretending to be kind. You really make me feel uncomfortable. It's so disgusting that I want to vomit." Ning Shu chuckled. "You're so disgusted that you want to vomit because you ate too much trash. Why do you think I'm here to see the sea of law? I'm here to see when this place is going to die. Don't fucking vent your anger on me. Did I cause the sea of law to wither? I'm here to see when you're going to die. I want to disgust you to death." Ning Shu said coldly. "Serves you right. I want to see how you're going to die. I'm not going to give you anything." Ning Shu turned and left. What the hell was this? If I want to give something, I'll give it. If I don't want to give it, I won't give it. He had clearly absorbed a large portion of the sea of law's energy, but he made it seem like others had let him down. In the future, he would go to see the sea of law every day. Being angered for no reason, Ning Shu was also furious. He turned and pointed his middle finger at the grand-uncle. It must be because the two fishes did not do as he wished. The grand-uncle was angry and vented it on her. Who wasn't a person? She had to bear his inexplicable anger for no reason. It felt like as long as it didn't go according to his wishes, everything else was insignificant and not worth mentioning. If he didn't give it, he wouldn't give it. Ning Shu's heart was cold. Even if the sea of law had collapsed, she could still watch it without any fluctuations. It was also her own fault for insisting on seeing the divine tree. She deserved to be scolded. In the future, she would stay far away from him. She didn't want him to take his anger out on her. If he died, he might take revenge on society. It wasn't worth it to make a group of people die with her. The conflict between them was unsolvable. If she could contribute an exceptional martial art, she might be able to get some good treatment. However, she wouldn't take it out. One side wanted it, and the other side wouldn't give it. What could she do? The grand uncle looked at the divine tree sapling that had just been planted. It seemed to be bigger than before, and the branches were more flourishing. Ning Shu now hoped that her soul could recover quickly. She couldn't bear the power of an exceptional martial art. Ning Shu returned to the system space and said to Dan Qing, "Go and do the mission." The chat system dinged. It was a message from the main system, Sang Liang, asking her to go to the consultation room. Ning Shu didn't want to go. "What's the matter? Just say it." "Sang Liang, let's talk when we meet." Ning Shu refused. No. She didn't want to see this group of people now. It was meaningless. She might as well do the mission. "Sang Liang, there's something for you." Ning Shu said directly, no. No matter what was given, she didn't want it. When had the organization ever done a losing deal? No matter what the organization gave her, she wouldn't be moved. "Sang Liang, Emperor Granule." Ning Shu. No. In her current soul state, fusing with the Emperor Granule was simply courting death. And the Emperor Granule was a shocking gamble. Her luck had always been very bad. She didn't want it. It was too useless. It wouldn't increase her strength by much, and it would also cause her to lose what she already had. This thing took up space for her. It was boring. There was nothing in this organization that could tempt him anymore. After hundreds of years of working, she could leave this place. "You can keep the Emperor Granule for yourselves." "I don't want it." She was so handsome that she wanted to cry. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39:11. Di Jun was something that he did not want. Ning Shu said to Dan Qing, "Let's do the mission." Dan Qing said a little fearfully, "Why don't we go to the main system? Maybe there's something important." Ning Shu thought carefully. How can there be something important? What's important to them is not important to me at all. Was there something important? Of course not. Other than life and death, what else was there? Now, the Sea of Law was facing life and death. They were anxious, but she was not. Even if the Sea of Law collapsed, she would still die. She would live as long as she could. Seeing through the organization's eternal life, Ning Shu was no longer afraid of life and death. People would die sooner or later. Dan Qing, what a pain in the ass. What a hoodlum. Ning Shu, do the mission. Dan Qing, I don't dare. His voice was very sad. Ning Shu, what's the use of having you? If I don't go to the consultation room, I won't even do the mission. If not, I'll go to the void to play with Fatan. With the divine pattern carved on the forehead by the old man, my soul is much more stable. Let's go. Sang Liang sent a message. You want someone to go to the system space to find you? Ning Shu curled his lips. Going to her system space was trespassing on her private space, which was quite unpleasant. Ning Shu snorted and went to the consultation room in Water City. Other than Sang Liang, there was also Tai Shu. Seeing senior uncle, Ning Shu pretended to vomit. Her disgust was obvious. Ning Shu stood at the door of the consultation room. Seeing Tai Shu and Sang Liang, he hesitated whether to go in or not. It seemed that they did not come with good intentions. His heart pounded. Ning Shu was loyal to his inner feelings. He bumped into the barrier and touched it with his hand. There was a thick barrier in front of him, blocking his way. It seemed that they did not come with good intentions. Ning Shu turned to look at the two. What's the meaning of this? Sang Liang was still sitting upright, very elegant. Since you're here, come in. I have something to discuss with you. Every time he heard Sang Liang mention a discussion, he felt that something was amiss. Ning Shu sneered. He had been caught like a turtle in a jar. That's right, he was the turtle. He didn't know where Fa Tian was, but now that he was in danger, Ning Shu's first thought was to summon Fa Tian. The other party did not come with good intentions, he had to be prepared. Ning Shu thought that he might be pushed into the sea of laws. He never felt that he was very lucky. Even an official had such a fate. If he was really a pig, he would probably be slaughtered when he got fat. Could it be that he was going to be stabbed today? For some reason, Ning Shu's heart suddenly calmed down. That was because the knife above his head was finally going to fall. This day had finally arrived. He didn't have to be on tenterhooks anymore. He just kept probing. If the organization wanted something, he would try his best to give it to them. If he couldn't give it to them, he would drag it out. Now was the time to show his true colors. Ning Shu flipped his hair, lifted his skirt, and walked into the consultation room. He sat on a chair and asked, "What are you looking for me for that you need such a big lineup? I really feel honored." He just had to give up on this. He then called out to Fa Tian in his heart. No matter what he faced, he still had to struggle. At most, he would just perish together. Sang Liang said indifferently, "It's not a big deal, don't be nervous." Ning Shu shook his head, fiddled with his hair, and said casually, "I'm not nervous. Instead, you guys are more nervous. What do I have on me that makes you guys so nervous?" Sang Liang said, "Show us the thing that provides life force and energy." Ning Shu asked back, after looking at it for a while. It was just taking a look. Even a 3-year-old child wouldn't believe such words. The day had finally arrived. Peerless martial arts were really in high demand. Seeing Ning Shu's indifferent look, Sang Liang said, "Your belief world might have become the birthplace of a new plane." Ning Shu was puzzled, but his expression didn't change. So, Chicken Feather's plain birthplace, at most, had a bit of life force. Ning Shu felt that they were interested in that life force. "We have an idea, which is to connect your world with the Sea of Law and draw the flow for the Sea of Law," Sang Liang said. Ning Shu burst out laughing. In the end, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. It took him a lot of effort to stop laughing. "What does your idea have to do with me? Why should I cut out a kidney for you guys? Originally, there was enough life force for a world inside. Now that it was diverted, it meant that the lifespan of the peerless martial arts would be greatly reduced. And as the source of her power, the peerless martial arts would also be damaged a lot. These people were not her family, not her lover, and not her friends. They made this request right from the start. Strictly speaking, there were still disagreements between them. They didn't do anything wrong when their heads exploded, but she was hurt. She just couldn't let it go. Pulling a person on the street and saying, "Cut out a kidney for me." It was so unimaginable, but they still took it for granted. Sang Liang frowned and said, "It's just a diversion." Ning Shu said, "Are you insulting my IQ or overestimating your IQ? It's just a diversion. You guys are wronged." The grand uncle said impatiently, "It's a diversion. Otherwise, just throw them all into the Sea of Law." His eyes were a little scarlet, as if he was enduring some pain, which made his emotions a little unstable. Ning Shu laughed. "I don't care if you guys die. I won't divert it. I won't give you anything. Old fart." He was already so old, but he was always thinking about where to steal some time. Couldn't he let nature take its course? The grand uncle frowned and waved his hand. "Just throw it in. What's the point of talking so much? She didn't think she had the right to bargain. An iron cage fell from the sky and directly covered Ning Shu. Ning Shu was stunned for a moment. He wanted to rush out of the cage, but he was bounced back. Sang Liang said, "Actually, we would prefer to see a win-win situation." Ning Shu was about to die from laughter. Win-win? Can you tell me where the win-win situation is? If it was really diverted, the peerless martial arts would be so pitiful. A part of it would be given to the Sea of Law, and the granduncle would have to absorb power from the Sea of Law. In other words, the little bit of vitality in the peerless martial arts would be divided up just like that. I only see you guys getting the benefits. What are my chances of winning? Ning Shu was expressionless. Who was this treating him as a fool? Even if he was really going to be pressed into the Sea of Law, he would still destroy the peerless martial arts. Or throw it away, throw it in some corner where you won't be able to find it even if you look for it. A black-hearted person wants to cut my kidney. Ning Shu tried several times but couldn't escape from the cage. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39:12. Since there was no other way, Ning Shu decided not to try. He sat cross-legged on the ground and looked at Taishu and Sang Liang indifferently. Taishu rubbed his eyebrows and said to Sang Liang, "Tell her that if she doesn't agree, just break it open and assimilate it." Ning Shu's pupils constricted. Break it open and assimilate it. Could it be that he wanted to break the peerless martial art and release the life force inside? At the same time, he wanted to fuse the Law C with the peerless martial art. When the Law C was lacking life force, he naturally wouldn't reject such a thing. Ning Shu's eyes flashed and he was brought to a place. This place was filled with white. She was locked up. Taishu and Sang Liang weren't present. It was obvious that they had opened up a separate space to lock her up. And she had laughed at Jingqing before. Now, her fate was the same as Jingqing's. She was going to sacrifice herself for the world. Ning Shu sat cross-legged in the cage. Should she sacrifice herself for justice? That way, she could die a better death. But even if she sacrificed herself for justice, she wouldn't make a monument for herself. Otherwise, her death would be too worthless. At least, she had to let others know about her sacrifice. Those living in the plain might not even know what happened in their world. What's more, they were ignorant about the outside world. As for Taishu and the rest, they would remember her sacrifice. Don't mention it. Being weak was a sin. Ning Shu supported her chin. Things had developed to this point, but she was actually very calm. She wasn't angry at all. Instead, she felt that this was how it should be. This was how it should be. If she was strong enough to make people fear her, they wouldn't dare to do this. At least, they wouldn't be able to lock her up. Ning Shu touched his ears and didn't immediately punish her. She probably wanted the peerless martial art to evolve and controlled him in advance. Even if she wanted to borrow the power of the peerless martial art, she had to wait for Fatian to come. She just didn't know if her soul could withstand the power of the peerless martial art. They weren't in a hurry. Ning Shu wasn't in a hurry either. It was probably because the Law C didn't have a final juncture. She was in jail. Did anyone come to visit her? It was so boring to be alone. Ning Shu pulled at his hair and counted them one by one. In the end, the numbers were messed up and he didn't want to start counting again. He took out a small branch from his meson space. There were some runes on it. He closed his eyes and touched the runes, trying to understand them. The surroundings were extremely quiet, with no sound at all. This caused Ning Shu to focus even more on comprehending the divine inscriptions. After an unknown amount of time, Ning Shu's transparent ears twitched as he heard footsteps. He opened his eyes and stuffed the branch back into the spatial ring. Staring in the direction of his footsteps, he could vaguely see a figure appearing in the thick fog. Gradually, it got closer and closer. One of them was an abyssal prefect dressed in a white tuxedo, while the other was a burly man who looked like a leopard ready to pounce. He looked a little familiar, but Ning Shu didn't dare to recognize him, especially since he had a demonic tail behind him. The little demon said that she was in seclusion. Could this be the result of her seclusion? Ning Shu stood up and said to the two of them through the iron cage, "Did you bring anything to eat? I want to eat fruits from the void. I have to bring something when visiting a jail." The little demon's mature and charming face twitched. "At this time, you still have the mood to eat." Ning Shu asked back, "Why not? Should I not be able to eat or sleep well and live in fear all day long? How torturous would that be?" The abyssal prefect said, "Then your mentality is quite good." Ning Shu said, "It's okay. After experiencing this many times, I can calm down. The worst outcome would be nothing more than death. As for what would happen after death, I'm already dead. Why should I care about what happens after death? Who cares if I can reincarnate? Who cares if there is a future? Even if there is a future, it won't be me anymore. It will be a new person. Did they want to destroy my will and give birth to a new one? This was actually quite worth it. Nurturing an obedient will of death. Moreover, the law C could completely fuse with peerless martial arts. This was not a warm world and organization, so Ning Shu was not surprised that he encountered this. In the end, he was not strong enough. The abyssal prefect said, "You actually don't have the qualifications to negotiate. Splitting up is the best way. Lose some to protect yourself." Ning Shu smiled, "Thank you for thinking about me, but I just don't want to be dissolute." The abyssal prefect said indifferently, "Then you can only die. It doesn't matter. If I die, then I die. Counting it, I won't live for long. According to the soul reincarnation cycle, my soul should have already been reincarnated." Ning Shu spread out his hands and said very shamelessly. The little demon said in annoyance, "Then you don't care about those reincarnation worlds?" Ning Shu sighed, "I can't even protect myself. Do I still need to protect them? I should be wronged and split up. Good for you, good for me, good for everyone. The problem is that I am not afraid of death. What peerless martial arts? I can only say that they will become wild. They will exist for as long as they can. Moreover, with the little demon, he would not let himself be homeless." Ning Shu looked at the little demon and asked, "Do you also think that I should compromise?" The little demon's voice became mature and deep. It was not like the voice of a young male. The voice control was addicted to this voice. He said word by word, "Do you have a choice?" Ning Shu's face was full of smiles, looking exceptionally good. "Yes, I choose to die." The little demon's expression was somewhat confused, he did not understand and asked, "Why?" Ning Shu said, "Probably because I have always been compromising in my heart. After compromising too much, I suddenly do not want to compromise anymore. They seem to be right, but I am hurt. I feel uncomfortable and do not want to suffer anymore. After encountering something, I am constantly convincing myself to let it go." Ning Shu smiled, "Let it go my ass. Even if I want to see them fail, I am not willing to fulfill their wishes. Don't talk to me about principles, I am too lazy to listen. Don't say that life is about constantly being wronged and constantly compromising. I do not want to compromise." Who did not understand the principles, but it was difficult to let it go in his heart. The little demon said, "Then you can die in peace. I will take good care of your peerless martial arts." Ning Shu nodded, "Then I can rest assured. I can die in peace." The abyssal prefect beside Ning Shu shook his head. They were all children after all. He spoke coldly to Ning Shu, "You think you're very important, but in reality, you're not even worth mentioning. Your death won't even affect our emotions. As for the things that you rely on and value, they're nothing to us. Don't think too much of yourself. Don't act like you're going to sacrifice yourself for a cause. You're so stupid. Chapter 39:13. Alas, can these people be a bit more straightforward? On one hand, they are saying how bad my things are and how they are not worth mentioning, and on the other hand, they want my things. Brother, your words and actions are really inconsistent. It's really a slap in the face. Ning Shu looked at His Excellency with a strange expression. Yes, it's my things that are not good. My life is like an ant's. Why are you saying this to me? I know. His Excellency said indifferently, it's your appearance. You are so moved that you seem to be rebelling against heaven and earth. Ning Shu said, seeing you say these words in front of me, I really have a feeling of rebelling against heaven and earth. It's your actions that give me this feeling. His Excellency snorted and turned around to leave, disappearing into the fog. The little devil stayed behind and slightly bent down to look at Ning Shu at the same level. You understand, so don't die. Surviving is more important than anything else. Your life is nothing in their eyes. It's not worth mentioning whether you live or die. Only by surviving can you have a future. Only then can you change the things you want to change. It's not good to look down on life. The little devil sighed. Ning Shu pursed his lips and said, I know what you mean. If I want to survive now, the only way is to divide the resources. Dividing the resources is already a great sacrifice in their eyes. But I feel very sullen. Even if I survive, the following years will be sullen. He was already prepared to die. It would be best if he could fight for a chance of survival. The little devil shook her head. If you die, your things will completely belong to them. They don't even need to divide the resources. They don't care if you live, but it's better for them if you die. Do you still need to choose which is more important? Ning Shu said with a smile, how would I know what will happen after I die? No matter what happens after I die, the world of samsara is your nest. Take good care of it. The skeletons inside are also cultivated by me. I spent a lot of merit points. Almost all the merit points were spent on the skeletons. Ning Shu sighed. When I go out, I will pinch your tail. Hee hee. The little devil was expressionless. The little demon still said, only by surviving can you change some things, when you are strong. Ning Shu almost rolled his eyes. That's right. Ever since I joined the organization, I've always had this thought. No matter what happened, I've always used this thought to motivate myself. In the end, I realized that everything is just a cycle. Once you become stronger, everything will be fine. When you encounter something, you will still hold it in. Once you become stronger, everything will be fine. It has always been like this. In fact, the results are almost the same, don't you think? After climbing over a hurdle, there was still another hurdle. He thought to himself, I just need to climb over this hurdle. After climbing over this hurdle, there is still another one. I feel like I'm going to become a pervert if this goes on. The little demon was speechless. I actually couldn't refute it. That's right. Weakness is the original sin. Actually, to a certain extent, having these things is your fault, because you are unable to protect them. Even if you're locked up here, some people will think that you deserve it. Because you're weak, it's even more your fault that you brought this thing in front of them. You deserve it. As for them taking your things, isn't that a matter of course? I hope that you can live, because if you die, you die. If you live, you can still work hard for your dignity. Ning Shu was speechless. A good woman wouldn't wear revealing clothes and not go home in the middle of the night. Otherwise, she wouldn't have met a pervert. Speaking of which, it's all because I wore revealing clothes and didn't go home in the middle of the night. Serves me right. Ning Shu smiled and said, thank you for your words. I will consider it carefully. The little devil had also left. Persuading Ning Shu to split up was the lesser of two evils. After all, only by surviving would there be a future. But sometimes, living in a sullen manner with the goal of surpassing others was actually a reason to constantly compromise. Ning Shu sat down, as he took out a small twig and continued to touch it. Comprehending divine inscriptions required one to be calm and tranquil, and right now, what Ning Shu needed the most was precisely that. Fodder smashed into the system space like a meteor, causing the whole space to shake twice. Even Dan Qing's personality trembled. Flip Sky looked at the empty system space and asked Dan Qing, "Where is he?" Dan Qing said, "I think he went out. He was called away." Fodder sighed and instantly realized that something was wrong. He vaguely sensed something and came back. He didn't make it in time. Because it was a matter of supreme martial arts. It shouldn't be so fast. Fodder's gaze was like lightning as he stared at a certain spot in the system space. "You told them." Although Fodder was asking a question, his tone was very certain. Dan Qing was silent and didn't say anything, but his attitude was a tacit agreement. Fodder sneered and a whip appeared in his hand. He waved the whip and hit the system space again and again. The system space trembled and couldn't withstand the power of the god-beating whip. It turned into ashes. The whip retracted into Fodder's body and Fodder disappeared like a meteor. Fodder's figure appeared in the white fog, but his figure was very blurry. Ning Shu was very happy to see Fodder, but it seemed to be a spiritual body. Fodder said, "The repulsive force of this space is very strong. I can't enter, so I can only use my spiritual body." Ning Shu frowned. It seemed that Fodder couldn't enter. She was locked up very tightly. Fodder said, "This matter was reported by that Dan Qing of yours." Ning Shu said calmly, "There was no friendship. It's normal for him to choose the organization. With such a thing, it was only a matter of time. Faced with such a huge monster and being crushed by its power, any normal person would know what to do." Fodder said, "Actually, I was careless about this matter." He didn't even avoid the invisible system when making the clay doll. Ning Shu said, "They said that the ultimate martial arts is the birthplace of the plane. Is that true? Why do they know more about the ultimate martial arts than I do?" Fodder said, "There is a trend, but it doesn't mean that it can become the birthplace of the plane. However, the vitality inside is what they want. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to be happy for nothing. I thought that after this transaction, we could leave the organization smoothly. In the end, we can't leave." Ning Shu was actually hoping for a fluke. If the transaction was completed, the organization might be able to abide by the contract and let them leave. He didn't want to leave bloody and pay the smallest price. However, if the transaction was not completed, he definitely couldn't leave. The organization was the one that suffered losses. Definitely not. Fodder said, "I'll think of another way. If you can survive this time, let's leave this place." Chapter 39:14. The people who came to see her all hoped that she would choose the less harmful option. Fodder didn't let her choose. Instead, he said that he would find a way to save her. Ning Shu nodded. "Okay, I'll listen to you. If we can survive, we'll leave. If something happens to me, you'll take the peerless martial arts and leave." Fodder said, "I'll try my best to find a way." Fodder said, "I hope you don't have too many concerns when you come out this time. It's normal for them to take your things. If they're not in good health, they'll kill an old hen to supplement their nutrition. They'll use your eggs to make steamed eggs, scrambled eggs, and boiled eggs. I don't know where your obsession to talk to them equally comes from. In terms of the food chain, you're not equal. As a human, what's wrong with killing a chicken? What's wrong with them taking your things? Don't you think the organization uses the living world built by mission enforcers to hold living creatures? What right do you have to say no? And you're probably an accident. You gave birth to the chicken's inner gold and gave the owner an unexpected harvest. In fact, the essence is almost the same. Your chicken, eggs, and chicken's inner gold all belong to the owner. They're not wrong. If you want to break through, you have to jump out of this chicken coop, not work hard to become a human. You can't become a human. Ning Shu had never had such a clear realization that a certain class couldn't be broken through. It was determined from birth. A chicken raised in a pen was a chicken. A chicken with sharp claws was also a chicken. And Taishu, Sang Liang, and the others were a family workshop. Ning Shu was almost brainwashed by this idea. He felt that his things and life belonged to the organization. As a human, of course, he should take it for granted that his chicken was his. Based on this logic, from the standpoint of the Grand Elder and Sang Liang, a chicken actually wanted to run away. If a chicken that had been raised for so long wanted to run away and become a wild chicken, it should be slaughtered. In that case, Ning Shu felt that whether he completed the transaction or not, he couldn't leave the organization. From the day he entered the organization, everything he owned actually belonged to the organization. That was the truth, but Ning Shu wasn't willing to hand over the chicken breast. If it was a brainless and muddle-headed chicken, then so be it. But if it was a chicken with intelligence and emotions, then it would have all sorts of thoughts. This was uncontrollable. Ning Shu was speechless. How am I an old hen? Fatan, he's older than me anyway. I can't. The repulsive force of this space is too strong. I'm going to be expelled. I'll think of a way to get back in. After saying that, Fatan disappeared. Ning Shu stroked her chin and paced back and forth in the cage. She couldn't let Fatan think of a way out alone. She also had to think of a way to break out. She touched the cage. There was a thick barrier that bounced her hand away. There was a strong repulsive force. If he were to force his way out, the backlash he would receive would be even stronger. Would his soul dissipate right away? However, he had to give it a try. Sang Liang held the book and walked in a long and dark corridor. There were rhythmic footsteps in the corridor. With a creak, Sang Liang pushed open the door and walked into a cave. There was a stone bed inside, and the slender grand uncle was lying on it. Sang Liang pulled a chair and sat beside him, waiting for him to wake up. You're awake, Sang Liang said to grand uncle as he closed the book. Grand uncle grunted coldly. Because he had just woken up, his voice was low and lazy. Sang Liang said, I've carefully studied the information that was presented to me. Our manufacturing method is actually not much different from hers. What we lack is faith in the energy body of laws. And that book itself is a world of faith. This is the only difference. Grand uncle, in that case, we need a world of faith. Let's see if we can find one from the mission enforcers. We can create a world of faith. A world of faith can absorb the power of faith and then produce it. What about the person locked up? I'm guessing that she was probably lucky to be able to produce it successfully. She bumped into it and a series of reactions were born. Oh, let's talk about it later. Grand uncle waved his hand and lay down again. He leaned sideways and rested his head on his bent arm. Sang Liang said, then let's create it first. If the sea of laws can't hold on anymore, use her to replenish some vitality. Oh, the grand uncle replied. He turned over and faced Sang Liang. With a thick nasal voice, he said in a muffled voice, do you think I should give up? It's up to you to give up or not. If you give up, then give up. If you don't, we'll continue. Sang Liang was silent for a moment before saying, if possible, I hope you give up this sea of laws. If a new sea of laws is really born, you can fuse with it. When the time comes, don't give birth to any planes. If there are any signs, just nip them in the bud so that the power won't be divided by these planes. I think you can change this captive hobby of yours. If it weren't for these planes, the sea of laws would be more than enough to last for hundreds of millions of years. It's time to stop enjoying yourself. In short, Grand-uncle had gone a little overboard. Grand-uncle, oh, let's talk about it later. There were fish in the small fish tank. If they were alive, then they were alive. If they were dead, then they would naturally be thrown away. Sang Liang, then let's start again and create a faith world. Sang Liang asked. Grand-uncle, oh. When the time comes, you have to let him out. It's not a good idea to stuff him in your body all the time, Sang Liang said. Grand-uncle, oh. Let's remake the rules or put him in. He has the most complete rules. If we use the rule stone, we might not be able to collect all the rules. Grand-uncle, oh. I don't think that faith world used a rule stone. Instead, it was thrown in that time and absorbed some rules that Jingqing dissolved in the virtual law. It was formed by chance. Grand-uncle, oh. Sang Liang looked at Grand-uncle. Go back to sleep. I'm leaving. Grand-uncle, oh. Grand-uncle turned over and fell into a deep sleep. Sang Liang went out with the book. Rings of black gas rippled out from Grand-uncle's body. Ning Shu insisted on touching the barrier with his hand. Each time, he used more force than the last. He was testing the power of this cage. In the hazy white fog, a person with black fog floating all over his body appeared. When Ning Shu saw this guy, a smile appeared on his face. He was still worried about how to open this thing. Now that this guy was here, it was equivalent to having an external force. It was pitch black as if he had crawled out of a coal mine. At a glance, it was obvious that Jingqing had taken over the body. Black gas floated all over his body. Black smoke curled up. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39:15. Although he was still so ugly, he had never felt that Jingqing was a little cute. Come on, break this iron cage, and I'll let you. He. Senior uncle looked at Ning Shu in the iron cage with his scarlet eyes and said in a hoarse voice, I didn't expect us to be in the same boat. Ning Shu exclaimed in surprise. Jingqing had always been a wandering black smoke without any consciousness. Now, he was actually conscious. From another perspective, the Grand Elder situation wasn't good. Ning Shu shook his head and denied, we are in the same boat, but we don't care about each other. Jingqing said, you're just an ant. You should be very proud to receive such treatment. Your life is worth it. Ning Shu laughed, worth a chicken feather. What's the honor? If you're so honored, why are you running away? Jingqing stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. His eyes became more and more scarlet, and he seemed to have lost his consciousness again. Ning Shu said, do you want to eat me? Come on, come on. Ning Shu danced in the iron cage like a piece of braised pork jumping left and right. She was so happy that Jingqing's eyes turned even redder. A cloud of black smoke floated out of his body and hit the iron cage. With a bang, it hit the iron cage and was bounced away by the strength of the iron cage. Ning Shu snorted and sat down again, too lazy to move. Jingqing hit the iron cage many times, but he didn't open it. On the contrary, Ning Shu, who was sitting in the iron cage, felt a little nauseous. She suddenly felt that the iron cage was not only used to lock her up, but also to guard against Jingqing. They were in the same boat, but there was absolutely no pity. Ning Shu expressionlessly watched Jingqing hit the iron cage again and again. What a fool. She was really bored. Someone was playing a monkey show for her. Although it wasn't very exciting, she had to put up with it. Ning Shu propped up her chin. She almost fell asleep amidst the clanging sounds. In the end, it was Jing Qin who got tired and used up a lot of his energy. Looking at the leisurely Ning Shu, he said, "You should help too." Ning Shu almost laughed to death. Jing Qin was still so naive and cute. "Work hard, or I'll be a woman that you can't have. Sooner or later, you will be pressed in. You might as well be eaten by me. I will take revenge for you," Jing Qin said incoherently. Ning Shu pursed his lips. "Thank you so much." Ning Shu waved his hand. "Keep hitting. What are you waiting for? If you delay any longer, Granduncle will come out." He no longer had any hope for Jing Qin. He had no other way, so he had to think of a way himself. Moreover, once the Grand Elder woke up, he might even reinforce the barrier. What a useless teammate. "You want to eat me? Eat shit." He had to escape before they took away the peerless martial arts. Jing Qin hit the iron cage without any skill. Every time he hit it, the black fog faded a little. It looked like he was torturing himself. It was really tragic. Ning Shu couldn't bear to look at it. Jing Qin's strength wasn't enough to keep him in the outside world. He could only retreat back into the Grand Elder's body. Before leaving, he said, "I'll come again next time." Ning Shu said, "Don't come again. I'm a woman that you can't have." Jing Qin said, "Don't worry. I'll definitely eat you." Ning Shu rolled his eyes. "Don't come again." The black fog gradually retreated into the Grand Elder's body. He lay motionless on the ground. No one knew when he would wake up. The space was quiet. Ning Shu was very bored. He supported his chin and looked at the Grand Elder's corpse, wondering if he had a key on him. What could he do to get out? Fa Tian couldn't do it alone. The Grand Elder on the ground moved. It looked like he was about to wake up. He rubbed his head and sat up, looking tired. He looked around, glanced at Ning Shu, and then rubbed his head. After a while, he stood up. Just as Ning Shu thought, he strengthened the cage. Ning Shu gave him the middle finger in his heart. "Jing Qin, I'm a woman that you can't have." He couldn't open the cage in one go. The result was like this. In fact, the two brothers had the same needs. One was very straightforward, drooling, and the other was much more elegant. He didn't eat raw, but cooked. It had to be ritualistic. All kinds of fancy operations were done, such as dividing, carp blessing, and planting trees. The Grand Elder turned and left without saying a word. Ning Shu touched some barriers with his hand and felt that they had been strengthened. It was harder to break than before. So, why did Jing Qin come here? If he really got the vitality of the peerless martial arts into the sea of law, Jing Qin would benefit from it. However, Jing Qin didn't seem to be thinking about this now. He only had one thought when he saw her, and that was to devour her. Jing Qin seemed to have been reduced to a beast. Ning Shu said to the back of senior uncle who was about to disappear, "Brother, the seams of your pants are torn." The Grand Elder didn't stop and disappeared into the white fog. Ning Shu held his head and scratched his hair, thinking about what to do. He had strengthened it. "Ning Shu, I'm coming in." Fa Tian came in, panting. This time, it wasn't his spiritual body, but his whole body. Obviously, Fa Tian had spent a lot of energy to enter. Fa Tian said, "Summon me now. I'll turn into a whip." Ning Shu felt that Fa Tian might not be able to enter. When he locked her up, he would definitely consider Fa Tian. Ning Shu called out to Fa Tian. Fa Tian turned into a stream of light and rushed towards the iron cage, but he was blocked outside. Fa Tian was rebounded by the iron cage's power. He somersaulted and stopped steadily on the ground. As expected. Fa Tian frowned. He didn't expect it to be so strict. Ning Shu held his forehead. Zheng Qing was indeed a natural counter to him. The strength of this cage has increased. You might not be able to break through from the outside. I'll think of a way from the inside, Ning Shu said. It strengthened again. Why do they think so highly of you? What happened? Fa Tian felt that the situation was a little serious. The repulsive force outside made it difficult for him to stand, and the strength of the cage had increased. Ning Shu looked helpless. It's a little complicated. Fa Tian's body was a little shaky. Ning Shu said, you should go out. Don't come in anymore. Otherwise, you'll attract their attention. They'll strengthen the strength, and it'll be harder to break through. I'll think of a way. I'll definitely come out. Fa Tian didn't think that Ning Shu would be able to think of a way. After all, his strength was there for all to see. However, the repulsive force was getting stronger and stronger. Fa Tian was pushed out of this world. Ning Shu's expression became more and more serious. He couldn't go on like this. The longer this went on, the harder it would be to escape. He couldn't just wait to die without doing anything. He definitely wouldn't give up until the last moment. If he couldn't change it at the last moment, then he would choose to die together. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39:16. Ning Shu sat cross-legged in the cage. He couldn't think of any way to get out. Zheng Qing couldn't break in from the outside, and Fa Tian couldn't as well. The effect would be minimal from the inside. Ning Shu touched his earlobe. What should he do? What should he do? He leaned back. Ning Shu stared at his raised hand and vaguely saw 2 leaves. That's right. Ning Shu immediately sat up. With the law of wood, he could use the law of wood to drill holes bit by bit. A germinated seed could lift up a stone and push it away. This was the power of vitality. What if the peerless martial art gave him more vitality? However, she felt that the power given by the peerless martial art was sometimes ineffective. She couldn't use the vitality inside. Vines extended out from Ning Shu's transparent soul and pierced the barrier. However, they were bounced back by the rebounding force. The vines continued to pierce the barrier. Ning Shu didn't make too many vines. Instead, he concentrated his power on one spot. Dripping water could penetrate stone. He would eventually be able to get out. She didn't immediately ask for his peerless martial art. She probably wanted to control him first so that she could retrieve it whenever she needed it. This meant that there was still time in the law of the sea. This also meant that her days in prison were far away. Life imprisonment. Fuck, this was too scary. Such a small cage, and she didn't even have a cellmate. This was driving her crazy. My sea of stars, by the time I get out, everything will have changed. I won't even recognize the world anymore. Ning Shu chanted in his heart. Peerless martial art, please give me power, give me power, give me power. However, the peerless martial art didn't have any reaction. Relying on the law of wood alone wasn't enough. The power provided by the peerless martial art was on the same level as the granduncle's. The power of a kitchen knife was fundamentally different from the power of a gun. One was a cold weapon, while the other was a hot weapon. Cold weapons had no chance of winning against hot weapons. No matter what, he had to have a hot weapon to have the same power. Ning Shu sighed as he watched the vines pecking at the barrier rhythmically like a woodpecker. Dong dong dong, it added liveliness to this silent space. Ning Shu hadn't thought of controlling the peerless martial art before, but when he needed power, the peerless martial art didn't respond. This was very awkward. How could he obtain some power from the peerless martial art? Did he have to fuse his entire soul with the peerless martial art? She had become a book. It was obvious that these people wanted to use the peerless martial arts as nutrients, and fuse themselves with the peerless martial arts. That was to throw themselves into the sea of law. After the fusion, even if it was diverted, it would still be the life force in his body being extracted. If all the eggs were placed in one basket, they would all break. But now, half of his soul had fused with the peerless martial art. Even if the peerless martial art was gone, he still had the other half of his soul that could start anew. What was the point of leaving half of his soul behind? He could just fuse with it directly. When the time came and he was really cornered, he could just self-destruct his soul and self-destruct his peerless martial arts. Why leave a way out? Just do what you need to do. Things are already like this. What's there to be afraid of? Ning Shu decided to completely fuse with the peerless martial art. He wanted to do something without any hesitation. The feeling of doing whatever he wanted to do was really fucking awesome. Ning Shu fused the remaining half of his soul into the peerless martial art. He had to experience another round of pain. His soul had to be forcefully squeezed into the peerless martial art, bit by bit, inch by inch. It was obvious that the power of the peerless martial art was much stronger than Ning Shu's. To be precise, Ning Shu was at a disadvantage. It was very difficult for a weak person to control a strong peerless martial art. Especially now that the peerless martial art was much stronger than before, it was even more painful than the previous fusion. Ning Shu wailed and rolled around in the iron cage. It was too painful, and he didn't know how long this pain would last. It was obvious that the peerless martial art didn't care about the soul. Fusion your sister. Ning Shu just wanted to fuse with it. He suddenly felt that his previous hypocrisy was very funny. He was even worried that his entire soul would fuse with the peerless martial art. If he fused with the peerless martial art, his fate would also be one. In the end, the peerless martial art didn't care about him. What could he do now? He could only rely on his willpower. Ning Shu squatted and clung to the iron bars. He was in so much pain that he lost his mind and stuck out his tongue to lick the iron bars. He grabbed the bars and cried, "Let me out. I'm willing to receive customers. Even 10 a day is fine." Ning Shu felt like he had tasted half of the tortures of hell. He couldn't see the end of the pain. His soul was crushed, stretched, rounded, and rolled into a fried dough twist. Ning Shu felt that his consciousness was becoming more and more blurry. Was he going to kill himself? If he had fused with it earlier, it might not have been so painful. Ning Shu gritted his teeth and endured. He might have gotten used to it. Ning Shu curled up into a ball in the iron cage. He closed his eyes and didn't move. Occasionally, Ning Shu would twitch. It was obvious that he was in great pain. Ning Shu tried to keep his consciousness clear. Otherwise, he would become a part of the peerless martial art. A part without consciousness. This wasn't what Ning Shu wanted. He wanted to have the peerless martial art, not become a part of it. Moreover, the peerless martial art rejected him. If he didn't have half of his soul, it would be impossible for him to fuse with the peerless martial art. Every time his consciousness started to become chaotic, Ning Shu would remind himself, "I don't want to receive customers. I don't want to receive customers." Ning Shu hoped that he could fuse with the peerless martial art before they noticed. If someone disturbed him, he would definitely fail. In the iron cage, Ning Shu didn't dare to vent his pain. He was afraid that he would make too much noise and attract their attention. Ning Shu twitched. His eyes were blank because the pain had made him unable to think. His eyes were dull. He felt that there was a majestic force that wanted to directly disperse his soul. Over and over again, it was tearing his soul apart. It was extremely painful. Ning Shu clenched his fists. His body was about to curl up into a round plate. If he had a body, Ning Shu felt that he might bite his tongue to commit suicide. It was too painful. It was so painful. If the pain continued, his consciousness would dissipate. He didn't even need the Taishu and the others to erase him. The will of death would probably give birth to a new Ning Shu. With a newborn Ning Shu, he would have no outlook on life or the world. He would be the one who instilled his views on life. When the time came, he would definitely be diverted. In fact, the peerless martial art was only a source of power. It didn't have any wisdom. It couldn't resist the diversion. It was like a river. When a path was artificially opened, the water in the river would naturally diverge. One part of the river would flow to another path. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39:17. As long as he thought of this happening, Ning Shu felt that he could endure it no matter how hard or tiring it was. He couldn't let them take advantage of him for nothing. Furthermore, they didn't even need to do anything. He had already fulfilled their wishes. How stifling would that be? Ning Shu felt that he needed to heal. He shouldn't stay in this high-pressure organization. Such a large organization with so many people needed high-pressure methods to manage. Otherwise, how could he manage so many people? He needed an iron-like restriction and an iron-like strength to suppress mission enforcers, the army, and the slightly powerful bosses. Ning Shu felt that although he had strength, he still seemed like a person who was willing to live an ordinary life, planting flowers and raising pigs. He worked so hard to become stronger just to live such a life. Because only by becoming stronger could he live such a life. If she was an ordinary person, she could choose to be a mediocre person and eat 3 meals a day to fill her stomach. However, the environment she was in didn't allow her to be so unmotivated. If she didn't make progress, she would die. If she wanted to live, she had to run desperately. Even if ordinary people lived an ordinary life, they wouldn't be in danger all the time. Ning Shu felt that he couldn't run forward blindly. He had to think about his own purpose. Being strong was to live a better life, not to make himself more miserable. He couldn't lose himself. Therefore, it was painful for him to hand over the peerless martial art. In order to not let himself suffer, he was determined not to hand it over. As long as he got out alive and left, the burden on his body would be lifted. Whether he was dead or alive, it would be lifted. So what if he was a granduncle? So what if he was a sea of laws? So what if he was an organization? Even if he was locked up, Ning Shu's heart was calm. Locked up, he didn't have to deal with the star stones, run to every world to find resources, and do missions. He didn't have to worry about anything. It was really great. It was just that the place was a bit small. Walking was like walking in circles. It had been a long time since he was alone with himself like this. This wasn't hard at all. Before he got out, he wouldn't feel the pain of being locked up. The people who were really suffering were the granduncle and the others. Who didn't live in a spiritual prison. Ning Shu was very, very sleepy. He closed his eyes for a while, just a while. In the end, as soon as he closed his eyes, he fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up, he was shocked. How did he fall asleep? Am I still me? Wasn't a new personality born? Oh, I'm still me. It's just that my head hurts too much. It hurts so much. I subconsciously touched my earlobe. There was no earring. The peerless martial art had disappeared. Could it be that she had fused with a peerless martial art? Was she a peerless martial art? Ning Shu rubbed his head. There was a crystal-like thing in his head. This crystal was about the size of a thumb. It was pitch black and looked extremely ugly. Ning Shu was speechless. I have a brain tumor. There was no such thing before. If it was a peerless martial art, it would be too ugly. But this was too ugly. He didn't ask for it to shine with golden light, but it was too painful to look at. Feeling the vitality and power inside, it really was a peerless martial art. What disappointed Ning Shu was that his soul was still the same. What was the problem that caused his soul to be so transparent? It had already fused, but it still didn't have a physical body. What was it missing? Ning Shu was in pain all over. He lay motionless on the ground. When the pain subsided, he stretched out his vines and began to attack the barrier. A small amount of power flowed out of the black and ugly brain tumor and into the vines. Just this little bit of power made the vines a little different. They looked tougher and greener. If the power was too strong, the vines wouldn't be able to withstand it and would directly explode. After all, the law of wood was only the law of wood. The power provided by a peerless martial art was a whole level higher. To break the barrier, one had to use power of the same level or higher. When the vine barrier was broken, he used a little more power. He once again saw how powerful this barrier was. If Fatian was here, he could withstand a lot of power and break through the barrier with a whip. But now, Fatian couldn't enter. It was also to guard against Fatian. After all, it was Fatian who had carried the power of the peerless martial art when he had slapped Taishu's face. If Fatian was here, there would be an intermediate carrier. It would only take a few minutes to break this cage. The vines tirelessly tapped on the cage, producing rhythmic thumping sounds. Ning Shu, on the other hand, was studying her own soul. It seemed that there was no change after fusing with the peerless martial art. The only change was that there was a brain tumor in his brain. He didn't suddenly transform into a scion, nor did he have a majestic power that had nowhere to vent. This kind of person was very disappointed. In the white fog, someone appeared faintly, and there were also footsteps. Ning Shu quivered and immediately put away the vines. He grabbed the iron bars and shouted with a sad face, "Then let me out." The figure was getting closer and closer. Ning Shu looked and immediately rolled his eyes. He let go of the iron bars. Zheng Qing, who was covered in black fog, came again. He said, "I brought tools this time. It will definitely work." He stuttered and spoke hoarsely. Ning Shu said, "Get lost. Don't come again." Originally, Ning Shu felt that he was about to reach the immortal state of not being happy with external gains and sad for himself. But when he saw this guy, Ning Shu felt that his mind was about to explode. Separated by the barrier, Ning Shu felt that his IQ was being sucked away by Zheng Qing. His IQ was extinguished in minutes. Zheng Qing's black fog approached the cage. His nose twitched, and joy appeared in his scarlet eyes. "You smell better than before, more fragrant, and more delicious." Ning Shu looked at him expressionlessly. If he could, he really wanted to kill Zheng Qing. New worries and old hatred made his eyebrows green. Ning Shu stared at him, his eyes glowing green and full of killing intent. The excited Zheng Qing took out a golden rope and stuttered, "I will carry you out and hide you, he, Ning Shu. You're such a clever little brat. But are you sure that Taishu won't wake up on the way? Then, he would strengthen the barrier infinitely." Zheng Qing wrapped the rope around the cage and tied it to his body. He tried to carry Ning Shu and the cage on his back. Ning Shu was speechless. "Please, I beg you to stop." What was Taishu doing? Wouldn't it be a disgrace to his image if he let such a retard out? Ning Shu, who was helpless in the cage, could only watch as he was carried away. It was unclear whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. However, as long as he had something to do with Zheng Qing and stayed with him, it was definitely a bad thing. If he was really lucky and Taishu didn't wake up and was taken away, where was Zheng Qing going to hide him? To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39:18. Zheng Qing was simply a devil. Ning Shu watched as she was taken out of the white space, and the surrounding scenery was quickly receding. Ning Shu asked, "Where are you taking me?" At that time Fatian wouldn't be able to find her. If they really ran away, there was an advantage, which was that they wouldn't have to break through that space again. What they did might be useless. If Senior Grand Uncle woke up halfway, both of them would be finished. Jing Qing really couldn't bear it in her life. She had been like this from the beginning. Jing Qing said, "Go to a place where no one can find you." Ning Shu raised his eyebrows. "Then we can live a happy life. Didn't they all say that? Go to a place where no one can find us and live a life of immortal couple, Fog." Jing Qing said, "I'm going to open the cage and eat you, he he he." Ning Shu rolled her eyes and lay in the iron cage. The tossing made Ning Shu a little sleepy. "Senior Grand Uncle must know the place you're looking for. Give up. Don't think you can beat him with your IQ," Ning Shu couldn't help but say. He didn't have any hope for Jing Qing's IQ. When Ning Shu spoke, he still had to pay attention to the black fog around Jing Qing. Once the black fog began to dissipate, Senior Grand Uncle would appear. Once Senior Grand Uncle woke up, he would throw her back into the white space, and Jing Qing probably wouldn't be able to enter in the future. Therefore, she was destined to be a woman that Jing Qing couldn't get. Jing Qing stammered, "I didn't use my power this time, so he will take a longer time to wake up. When it's about time, I will go back and never let him find out." Ning Shu said. "You're really wise." Sure enough, no matter what race, they would use all their strength and wisdom for a bite. Ning Shu was silent. It didn't matter if Senior Grand Uncle found out. Senior Grand Uncle must be annoyed by this. Jing Qing probably wouldn't be able to get close to that space in the future. This was also good. The closed barrier didn't need to be strengthened again and again. If the Grand Uncle didn't find out and Jing Qing really took it away, he just needed to open the cage. When she came out, would Jing Qing be a problem? It wouldn't be a problem at all. Therefore, whether she discovered it or not, the only effect it had on her was that the barrier had become thicker. Sooner or later, he would be able to break through. She was just afraid that after tormenting him for too long, he would get impatient and directly kill her. Now, it was just her and Jing Qing who were tormenting each other. It was even more annoying. Especially when Jing Qing was constantly thinking about eating him. Ning Shu asked curiously, "Can't you break away from the existence of the Grand Uncle? Is it fun for you to change like this?" Jing Qing held back for a long time before spitting out two words, "It's fun," Ning Shu sighed. "Your lives are so barren. How is this fun?" Ning Shu felt that his speed had slowed down, and he could clearly see his surroundings. He had arrived at a beautiful day. From then on, the prince and princess lived happily ever after. Ning Shu glanced at Jing Qing, who was emitting black gas, and snorted. "I'm a woman you can't get." Jing Qing loosened the rope, and the iron cage fell to the ground with a clang. It hit the ground and left a deep mark. Ning Shu was unprepared. He was so shaken that he almost spat out his heart. Ning Shu gave Jing Qing the middle finger. He looked around and asked, "Where is this place?" Jing Qing said, "He definitely can't find this place. This is." He covered his mouth as he spoke, for fear that the Grand Uncle would find out. Ning Shu patted the iron cage and said, "If you have the ability to open this thing, I will let you eat it." Waves of black gas floated out of the Grand Uncle's body and condensed into a black fog. Ning Shu was very bored. "Is it still hitting? Can you change the method? You don't feel pain, but I'm shaken." He thought that Jing Qing would have a new method or at least a tool. She knew how to carry the cage away with a rope. He thought that she would take out some powerful tool. The black fog paused for a moment and asked for Ning Shu's opinion. "Then what do you say?" "I'll listen to you," Ning Shu said. "You are really considerate." Jing Qing asked, "Then I'll hit it." Ning Shu was speechless. He didn't have any hope for Jing Qing. Even if he wanted to be buried in Jing Qing's mouth, Jing Qing couldn't make her jump into his mouth. This was really a very sad thing. However, Jing Qing didn't seem to realize this. She was happily tossing around. Jing Qing really had an indescribable happiness. Happy idiot. Ning Shu even had the thought of abandoning her own intelligence. It was obvious that she was infected. Would the grand-uncle be infected by Jing Qing's idiocy? It would be great if the grand-uncle became so happy. Jing Qing knocked against the cage from all directions and angles, causing the cage to creak loudly. Ning Shu didn't care about this at all. He even wanted to laugh. After a while, the black fog on Jing Qing's body began to dissipate. She immediately stopped. Obviously, the grand-uncle was about to wake up. Jing Qing said to Ning Shu, "I have to go. I can't let him find this place. You have to find a way out yourself." Ning Shu was speechless. He was speechless. Jing Qing ran away as soon as he said that. His figure disappeared in an instant, leaving Ning Shu in the world of birds and flowers. This place was better than the white space before. There were flowers and birds here. Some bold birds landed on the iron cage. Ning Shu stretched out her vines and started to attack the barrier with them. She didn't see the benefits of integrating the unique martial arts for the time being, but there was one thing that really benefited her. That was the world tree that was rooted in her body. The world tree was really luxuriant. Some of the leaves had already given birth to living creatures. It was a complete world of living creatures. This development was a bit rapid. However, thinking of the vitality in the unique martial arts, it could make a qualitative leap in the unique martial arts. Ning Shu sped up, hoping that she could get out before the grand-uncle and the others found her. Once she went out, it would be goodbye. She would become a wild chicken and never come back. After increasing the power output, the vines couldn't take it anymore. Ning Shu had to control the power so that the law of wood wouldn't collapse. Then, there would be nothing to carry the power. She focused on attacking the cage. She didn't know if there was a positioning device on the cage. Ning Shu calmed her mind and sped up her actions. At the same time, she called out to Fa Tian in her mind, hoping that Fa Tian could find her. She didn't know if Fa Tian could enter this space. Ning Shu injected more power into the vines. The vines exploded, unable to withstand such power. Not only did the vines explode, but even the law of wood between the thumb and the index finger cracked. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39:19. Ning Shu did not dare to increase his strength. He used a bit of vitality to repair the wood law. When the cracks on the wood law disappeared, he stretched out the vines to attack the cage. With just a little bit, the barrier would explode like glass. Fa Tian's voice sounded. "Ning Shu, where are you? I can't see you. I'm in a space. But I can't find that space. Is it stacked up? I can't find it." Jing Qing was an idiot. He was a burden when he was asked to, but when he should not be, he was very helpful. No wonder he could not be found. Fa Tian's voice was very close, but they could only hear his voice and not see him. Fa Tian asked, "Why are you here?" Ning Shu let out a long sigh. "It's really a long story. Fa Tian, I don't want to hear it." Ning Shu, "I don't want to say it either." After injecting more vitality and strength into the vines became stronger. They hit the barrier again and again. The barrier made thumping sounds and the entire barrier was shaking. The vines became stronger and stronger. The entire cage was like a ship in a storm that could capsize at any time. A smile appeared on Ning Shu's face. With this, he would definitely be able to break the cage. The vines were like a snake's tail. They pierced deeply into the barrier. The barrier was like glass, and countless cracks appeared on it. Like a spider web, the cracks spread throughout the entire cage. Then, with a bang, it exploded like glass, turning into specks of starlight and disappearing. Ning Shu looked up to the sky and roared. I'm out. Ning Shu said, Fa Tian, I broke the barrier. Fa Tian, but I can't find your location. What's going on? I can't find you. He felt like he was right in front of him, but he could not touch him. There was a layer of invisible things. It was like they were in different dimensions. It was like a dimensional wall. He could not break the dimensional wall. Ning Shu said, I'll think of a way to get out. This place was really not easy to find. No wonder Zhengqing was so confident. The scenery inside was the same all year round. It was always filled with birds chirping and fragrant flowers. Upon closer inspection, the trajectories of these flowers and birds were all in a cycle that never stopped. The space was real, but these flowers and birds were fake. Ning Shu's hand passed through a huge flower. It was indeed a fake. Ning Shu touched the enchantment of this space and was trapped again. He felt that this place was different from the white space from before. Ning Shu used the vines as usual, but surprisingly, the vines were unable to find a breakthrough point. The vines stretched out as if they were reaching into an endless black hole. No matter how long the vines were, they all disappeared. Ning Shu retracted the vines, which seemed to have retracted from a black hole. This was a little hard to fathom. Ning Shu squatted down, propped up his chin, and puffed up his cheeks. Could it be that he was waiting for Zhengqing to come over? The first thing Zhengqing wanted to do when she came over was to eat him. Fa Tian's voice was very close. Tell me, what's in your place? Ning Shu said, I'm in a place with flowers, grass, butterflies, and birds. Fa Tian was speechless. After a while, he could see that there was a place with flowers and grass from the abstract painting on the wall. Fa Tian said, I'm in a cave now. The walls of this cave are painted with extremely abstract lines. You're in this painting. Ning Shu was speechless. So I'm trapped in the painting. How do I get out? Do I destroy the painting? Ning Shu asked suspiciously. If the painting was destroyed, would he be destroyed as well? This method is not good. You can only draw a door. You can go through the door and come out. Although it's a very abstract painting, it takes a lot of strength to add a line to this painting. And this kind of primitive strength is not simple strength. Ning Shu asked, can you do it? It wasn't that he doubted Fa Tian's strength, but Fa Tian's age was right there, and his knowledge couldn't keep up. Not to mention that he was older than Fa Tian, he was also at a loss when it came to the void. Fa Tian said, let me try. Fa Tian looked around and casually picked up a stone from the ground. The stone was a little sharp. Fa Tian picked it up and shook it in his hand. With the sharp side facing the wall, he took a deep breath and prepared to add a more abstract door to the abstract painting. But the stone tip was pressed against the wall and couldn't move at all. The wall rejected his strength, and his hand trembled. Fa Tian grabbed his wrist with his other hand and slid it with difficulty. It was just a small mark, only a finger long. It was very time-consuming to draw a door. Ning Shu's voice came from the wall. Fa Tian, how are you? Are you okay? Fa Tian grabbed his wrist with one hand and drew a line with difficulty with the other. I'm okay. It's just that I have to wait a little longer. Ning Shu said, it's okay. You must pay attention to your safety. Don't do anything dangerous. Also, someone might come here. Don't bump into her. Hurry up and avoid her. Maybe I'll go out with that person. If Zhengqing came, she would find a way to go out with him instead of waiting for Fa Tian to work alone outside. Fa Tian said, oh, don't talk to me. I have to concentrate. If there's a next time, I won't care about you. Ning Shu said, I'll care about you. Sang Liang found the sleeping grand-uncle and pushed him. Wake up. The person ran away. Grand-uncle rubbed his forehead and woke up. Ran away. It must be him. He's as greedy as a dog. I don't know where he took the bone to. Sang Liang frowned. Don't sleep all day long. Once you sleep, he will run out. Grand-uncle said, oh. I'll catch him and ask him. Grand-uncle grabbed the black fog. Jing Qing shouted hoarsely, I won't give in. I won't say anything even if you beat me to death. Grand-uncle couldn't be bothered to look at this retard. I gave you a chance, but you didn't cherish it. I still have to throw her into the law of nothingness. Jing Qing sneered. His voice was hoarse and unpleasant. Wait until I eat her. You won't be able to point fingers at me. I'll throw you into the law of nothingness and let you know that the law of nothingness is full of p-values. Jing Qing had a grand plan in his heart, but on the surface, he was scared and didn't say a word. It wasn't easy for him to carry her out, but he was determined not to say anything. Senior Grand Elder directly used time reversal to see what had happened before clearly. On the screen. Seeing someone using his own body to carry a big iron cage, Grand-uncle's expression was very cold. He waved his hand and said to Sang Liang, take him to calm down. Grand-uncle, you bastard. You want to lock me up again? Why do you think you can control me at will? The black fog scolded. To watch the new chapter of Zoe, please go to, mobile address. Chapter 3920. You cold-blooded monster who had a mother but no father. If you have the ability, come and kill me. Come and kill me. Jing Qing's black fog moved up and down the cave. The Grand Elder turned his head indifferently and stared at him with knife-like eyes. What did you say? I told you, you're a cold-blooded monster who had a mother but no father. The Grand Elder looked at him. Say it again. Let me say it 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. You, cold-blooded monster, I curse you to die more miserably than me. I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. The Grand Elder raised his chin slightly, and his glasses reflected a cold light. The light flashed. Say it again. Monster, cold-blooded monster, cold-blooded monster, the Grand Elder rubbed his eyebrows. Take him away. Make sure his mind hasn't recovered and he's still a fool. Jing Qing was powerless in front of the Grand Elder. Other than cursing and struggling, he was useless in the end. Sang Liang still locked him up. Jing Qing, who was locked up, kept cursing. Even if I die in the law of nothingness, even if my soul scatters, I will never give in. If he hadn't appeared frequently during this period of time and consumed too much of his strength, the Grand Elder would have been able to do anything to him. Jing Qing, who was locked up, was very worried that he would be caught hiding. Humph, he didn't believe that he could enter that place. Dream on. Time backtracking was a big problem. Why hadn't he thought of it? He should have blocked it. Jing Qing thought angrily and bumped into the cage. Let me out and I'll tell you, without the nourishment of the Grand Elder's body, the black fog quickly became dispirited. It was motionless in the corner, like a palm-sized dark cloud hanging there. Sang Liang was speechless. He was indeed a fool. Didn't he realize that he didn't even have a body? How could he soak in the law of nothingness? The success of the peerless martial arts had proven that the law of nothingness had fused with the law of nothingness. Just in case, he had to take Jing Qing's body out and soak it again. However, Jing Qing was now a wisp of consciousness. He didn't even have a body, so he didn't need to be soaked at all. However, it was good to let him misunderstand that he was going to die in the law of nothingness. Sang Liang said to Grand Uncle, the faith world is being constructed now. We need to invest a lot of faith power. When the time comes, throw in the law of nothingness. It could be said that he was copying the pattern of the previous peerless martial arts. Then, he used the star stone to encase the law of nothingness. After that, he threw in the energy body. To provide energy for this world of faith. Grand Uncle, oh, okay. Sang Liang said, just in case, we have to catch the person who ran away. If the experiment fails, we still need her things. That's a backup battery. It's not good to lose it. Sang Liang looked at the Grand Uncle. Go and bring it back. Something might happen if it's too long. Grand Uncle, oh. After Sang Liang left, the Grand Uncle set off for that place. Fa Tian was struggling to draw the door when he sensed the spatial fluctuations. He said to Ning Shu, someone's coming. I'm going to hide. Be careful. Ning Shu, who was in the wall, was shocked. Jing Qing said that no one could find this place. The one who could find this place was either Jing Qing or Senior Uncle. Jing Qing was fine, but if it was Senior Uncle, would she have to repeat what happened before? How annoying. Ning Shu didn't want to have anything to do with this organization now. After leaving, she would never appear within 100 miles of this organization. Senior Uncle, Sang Liang, and the others were as strong as gods. She didn't want to be on equal footing with them. They were gods, and she was her little chick. Did they have any deep hatred? Yes, there was. In fact, it was just Ning Shu's one-sided thought. The other party didn't care about her at all. If she avoided them, this class conflict wouldn't exist. She was really exhausted. She would be at a disadvantage if she fought against them, but she was unwilling to hand over her things. She had collected these things bit by bit. If she wanted to buy them, she had to find them in the world. She didn't take them from the organization and had to return them. From Ning Shu's point of view, these things were hers. From the organization's point of view, yours was mine, and mine was still mine. The entire organization was Senior Uncle's property. Senior Uncle appeared in the cave and looked at the almost abstract murals on the wall. His expression was a little inexplicable, a little speechless, and a little nostalgic. He wanted to pick up a stone, but when he saw that the stone on the ground was full of dust, he directly used the tip of his sword to draw on the stone wall smoothly. The door that Senior Uncle drew was still very abstract. It was similar to the traces on the murals. The only difference was that the traces were a little new. When Fa Tian saw that Senior Uncle was about to enter, he immediately turned into a scattered light and followed him. As soon as Senior Uncle entered, Fa Tian's figure became bigger. Ning Shu rushed over. Ning Shu grabbed Fa Tian. He was very excited. They finally met. After touching Fa Tian, Ning Shu looked at the person who came. There was no black fog on his body. It was Senior Uncle. Standing in this place where birds were singing and flowers were fragrant, the breeze blew gently. It was really not a suitable place for fighting. But he had to fight. Fortunately, he had broken through the barrier before. Otherwise, the barrier would be thickened now. Ning Shu tilted his head and looked behind Senior Uncle. He saw a door with extremely twisted lines. Who drew this door? Senior Uncle. When Senior Uncle saw Ning Shu, he frowned. He probably realized that Ning Shu had completely integrated with the peerless martial arts. Ning Shu swung the whip. Come on. If I die in your hands, it's fine. But if you die in my hands, then I'm sorry. Since he couldn't run away, he could only fight. This time, whether he lived or died, he would no longer have anything to do with this group of people. He could finally be free. Senior Uncle looked at Ning Shu condescendingly. He reached out and directly grabbed the holy whip in her hand. The holy whip couldn't control Senior Uncle's control. It involuntarily floated in his direction. Ning Shu stared blankly at Senior Uncle holding the holy whip. The holy whip seemed to belong to Senior Uncle. He wanted to escape several times, but there was no way. Ning Shu was speechless. I'm at a loss now. What's going on? Fa Tian's voice sounded in Ning Shu's mind. He controls part of my body. Now, Fatan felt as if someone was grabbing his ankle. He couldn't break free. The hand holding him was very strong, as if a mountain was pressing down on him. Fatan was suddenly full of worry about today's matter. He was afraid that he couldn't leave. But with today's matter, he couldn't escape even if he wanted to, and it might even cause their plan to be brought forward. This was really unpleasant. How can it be? Fatan didn't have much interaction with Senior Uncle. How could Fatan be controlled by Senior Uncle? To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39:21. You're still the same old man. She thought that the grand uncle was definitely going to die, looking half dead. Perhaps in his lifetime, the people who were half dead were other people. Ning Shu couldn't figure out why the grand uncle controlled Fatan. She didn't doubt Fatan. If Fatan wanted to betray her, it couldn't be easier. He could just turn around and leave. Why would he need to follow another person? If Fatan went to any corner of the void, she wouldn't be able to find him in this lifetime. To be honest, her situation wasn't worth Fatan being used by another person just to get rid of her. What was the difference between being used by her and being used by another person? Moreover, Fatan liked to go to the void when he had nothing to do. He didn't have a good impression of this organization and even wanted her to leave it. It didn't make sense that she would be so stupid to be controlled by the grand uncle. Fatan had never liked this organization. Ning Shu needed a weapon to carry the power and release it. Only then would it be lethal. Otherwise, Ning Shu would only be a person who only had internal energy. Without any moves, he would not be able to turn his internal energy into external energy. And the Heaven Punisher was the carrier. Nothing on her body could bear the weight of the boundless power. Now that she didn't have this carrier, it was equivalent to taking away nearly 90% of Ning Shu's power. Ning Shu realized that Fatan was in danger, but she couldn't save Fatan. This was really a terrible thing. At this point, Ning Shu felt that there was nothing she couldn't bear to part with. If she really couldn't leave, Ning Shu still hoped that Fatan could live. Various thoughts flashed through Ning Shu's mind. Suddenly, a light flashed through her mind. It was when the grand uncle had given his gun to Fatan. That thing seemed to be an innate treasure. After giving it to Fatan, Fatan naturally wanted to integrate it into his body to increase his lethality. That feeling was like having a little calf in the house and wanting to pierce the calf's nose. After piercing the calf's nose, the string would be in the hands of the owner. And Ning Shu was like a cowherd boy, taking care of this calf. He couldn't even be considered a child, at most a shepherd dog. Ning Shu suddenly laughed out loud. These people were really far-sighted. Her IQ had been thrown 1,000 miles away. Perhaps to them, piercing a calf's nose and putting a rope on it was just common sense. It didn't even require intelligence. At that time, she was very surprised that the Grand Elder had taken out a gun. She originally thought that it was because they were both void creatures. However, even if they were both void creatures, they were still strangers. She really couldn't afford to offend these gods. She was convinced. Sun Wukong had always been in the palm of the Buddha. A cage fell from the sky and was about to cover Ning Shu. Ning Shu dodged it. The flowers and grass on the ground began to grow wildly, entangling Ning Shu. Just a moment ago, the place was still full of birds and fragrant flowers. Suddenly, it became ferocious and full of murderous intent. The grass and leaves were full of sawteeth, and the flowers became huge man-eating flowers that were dripping with saliva. With a fishy smell, they opened their bloody mouths and bit Ning Shu. Ning Shu avoided the vines and man-eating flowers while explaining to Fatan why his body was controlled by the Grand Elder. Fatan was silent for a while, then said in a low voice, "I'll break one of my legs." Ning Shu was stunned for a moment and was almost trapped by the cage. What are you talking about? How do you break it? Are you going to destroy yourself? Self-destruct? Ning Shu looked at the Grand Elder outside the battlefield. He held the holy whip. It was such a pale and slender hand that held Fa Tian, but Fa Tian couldn't resist. This was a horrifying scene. On the other side, he was still standing in the scene of birds and fragrant flowers. He stepped on the shallow grass, and small flowers fluttered in the wind. Birds hovered over his head. When the spring breeze blew, the corners of his windbreaker, grass, and flowers were all slanted in the direction of the wind. The black clothes were abrupt and distant in the leisurely spring scenery. Ning Shu cried. What equal footing? What equal conversation? What kind of joke was this? How stupid was she in the past? Some forces were just like this. They were as helpless as ordinary people facing the power of capital, because the power of capital strangled everything. Just like the power she was facing now. She wasn't qualified to participate in the game of capital, but the power of capital wanted to take away her things at the smallest price. This allowed the power of capital to obtain greater power, and then this power of capital would be even more powerful and invincible. She wasn't as skilled as others, and she couldn't blame others. Ning Shu wiped her tears and said to Fa Tian, "Don't blow yourself up." Fa Tian said, "I'm not going to die, but one of my legs was grabbed and I couldn't move. I had no choice but to break this leg. Not only for you, but also for myself." He wouldn't let himself be controlled by others, let alone by such an organization. He didn't want to serve this organization. This organization had nothing to do with him. It's just that my strength will be damaged. I don't know what the sequelae will be. Let's talk about it after this disaster, Fa Tian said. Ning Shu sniffed and looked determined. Come over immediately when you break it. I'll pass the power to you. However, it would be very painful to cut off a part of one's strength. How many people could really be ruthless enough to cut off one of their arms and legs? Even in the face of a desperate situation, how much courage would it take to cut off an arm to survive? And now, Fa Tian was facing such a situation. He had to be ruthless to himself. In order to get rid of the rope that tied him up, he had to tear his nose open. It was bloody and painful. Ning Shu felt that his heart was about to explode. That kind of pain was even more painful than fusing with a peerless martial art. Ning Shu murmured and shouted, Fa Tian, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't hurt. She was like a frog at the bottom of a well. She was an ignorant fool. When Fa Tian was ignorant, she harmed Fa Tian. She didn't know anything. She didn't know anything. However, this wasn't a reason to let Fa Tian suffer. The crackling of whips sounded in the air. Countless invisible whips were waving. However, those illusory whips were broken inch by inch, like bones breaking inch by inch. How much pain was Fa Tian going to suffer? Fa Tian broke free from the Grand Elder's control and flew towards Ning Shu like a sword. Ning Shu grabbed Fa Tian. The whole whip was trembling. It was very painful. Ning Shu clearly felt that Fa Tian had become much weaker. She burst into tears. She kept injecting life force into Fa Tian's body, hoping to relieve Fa Tian's pain. The Grand Elder narrowed his eyes and raised his hand. He looked at his empty hand. Before the whip left, it had left a deep mark on his hand. It was so deep that the bone could be seen. The flesh inside was black. Not a single drop of blood flowed out. Some power leaked out from the wound and was absorbed by the whip. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39-22. They were really good at scheming. Fa Tian was originally a calf of the organization. He was also a calf of a powerful organization when he entered the Holy Land. Ning Shu, on the other hand, had to serve the organization for free for hundreds of years without any compensation. Not only did she help look after the calf, but she also embezzled the shepherd dog's dog food. The shepherd dog was also very happy and dutiful. If it wasn't for the wrong time, Ning Shu really wanted to kneel down in front of these people. They had such powerful strength, but they still had such thinking. The power of capital was incomparably strong. It was impossible to resist and directly turned into powder without any resistance. There was a problem with her thinking. The mistake was that she thought that Fation didn't belong to the organization, and that sending Fation to the Holy Land was a personal action. Since it was a transaction, there must be a price to pay. She had never thought that she was actually herding sheep and cattle for others. She didn't have that momentary awareness or illusion. If it wasn't for what had just happened, Ning Shu felt that she had never known such a thing. Fation often said that she was a hen, but he didn't think that he was a calf of the organization. In fact, he had already been stamped by the organization and had the right to belong. Ning Shu grabbed the trembling Fation and held back her tears. She saw that the abstract line of the door behind the grand uncle was getting smaller and smaller. If it was completely closed, she might be locked inside. Things like painting could only be broken from the outside, not from the inside. Now Fei Tian's situation was very bad. If he was locked up, they wouldn't have any power to resist. It was very likely that they would be directly thrown into the sea of law. This was their last chance. There was no black smoke coming out of the grand uncle's body, which meant that Jing Qin couldn't disturb him now. Facing the grand uncle, Jing Qin was trash, and so was she. Ning Shu said to Fa Tian in her heart, "We have to fight." Even if it was a dying struggle, they had to struggle. Ning Shu swung her whip and directly turned the entangled vines into powder. The man-eating flower was also destroyed. The surroundings returned to the scene of birds chirping and flowers fragrant, tranquil and peaceful. However, the air was filled with a whistling baleful aura, blowing the flowers and grasses in all directions. Fa Tian's voice trembled as he endured the pain. "All right, let's do it. This is our last chance." Fa Tian and the others were captured. He might survive, but Ning Shu definitely wouldn't. But for Fa Tian, being held hostage by this organization was too unbearable. He would rather die. Ever since he was born, he had always been free. Ning Shu took the initiative. Because the door was getting smaller and smaller, senior uncle and Jing Qin could come and go freely, but she couldn't. If they were caught again, they wouldn't be able to escape anymore. This was the only time they could survive. If they could escape, they would have a chance of survival. If they were caught, they would definitely die. The Grand Elder opened his hand, and a black sword appeared in his hand. Black lines quickly crawled all over his neck. Ning Shu snorted and whispered to Fa Tian, "So ugly, old fart." In fact, her voice wasn't soft at all. The Grand Elder's expression was indifferent. He didn't care about her words at all. Or rather, he didn't care about a domestic animal that couldn't arouse his emotions. The Grand Elder waved his sword, and a black sword light returned to Ning Shu. The sword light swallowed everything around it like a black hole. Ning Shu's whole body trembled as she dodged the black sword light. However, the sword light's attractive force was especially strong in this cramped environment. Not only that, but there was also a cage that fell from the sky to trap her. Ning Shu's soul was in extreme pain. It was filled with majestic power, making her feel as if her soul was about to be torn apart. Ning Shu transferred power into Fa Tian's body. Fa Tian had a broken leg and suffered heavy injuries. He had to bear such power again, so he groaned. Ning Shu gritted her teeth and waved the whip at the Grand Elder. The whip whistled with majestic power, and the Grand Elder dodged it. The fierce collision between the whip and the black sword brought about powerful aftershocks. The god-beating whip angrily attacked the Grand Elder. Countless whip shadows attacked the Grand Elder. The black sword in the Grand Elder's hand turned into countless small swords, tangling with the whip shadows. The fierce aftershocks made the Grand Elder's clothes flutter. However, Ning Shu's transparent soul remained motionless in such aftershocks. The Grand Elder raised his head and looked at the whip shadows in the air. He reached out and grabbed Fa Tian's body whip. Ning Shu could almost hear Fa Tian's painful voice. Ning Shu's brain immediately snapped. She rushed over and raised her hand to grab the Grand Elder's face. "You fucking let go of my Fa Tian." Ning Shu's fingers left 4 deep scratches on the Grand Elder's face, which ran across his whole face. The glasses were flung away and fell into the shallow grass. It was not very obvious. Ning Shu and the Grand Elder were stunned at the same time. Ning Shu didn't expect that his hand could cause harm to the Grand Elder. When he saw that Fa Tian was caught, the first thing he did was to grab the Grand Elder's face like a woman. His flesh and blood were black as if they were rotten. Fa Tian took advantage of the moment when he was stunned to break free from the Grand Elder's control. Ning Shu felt that his fingernails were full of black flesh and blood. He quickly squatted down and wiped his hands on the ground. They were stained with the rotten smell. It was so disgusting. Without the glasses, the Grand Elder's fine hair left some shadows on his forehead. He raised his eyes slightly. "I've always given you the choice to give birth, but you've made trouble again and again." Being scratched in the face by a chicken's claws, he must be so angry that he wanted to kill the chicken. Ning Shu felt that the two of them shouldn't be talking about this. The developer demolished your house and used it as a base. He gave you some money, but this money wasn't enough to give you a place to settle down. The most terrifying thing was that there was no government regulation in her environment. There was no power from above to suppress the developer. She had no way out. At this time, the developer actually asked if she wanted to live or not. If someone wanted to destroy the Grand Elder's Sea of Law, how would he react? And the peerless martial arts was what she needed to settle down and settle down. It was enough to give her a chance to live. Weakness was the original sin. People of the same class talked about reason, while those of different classes talked about strength. She wouldn't have to die if she was diverted. Ning Shu didn't bother to say a word to the Grand Elder. He also didn't have the desire to fight. He directly rushed towards the door. Fa Tian's current state wasn't good. It wasn't the time to fight. They had no chance of winning if this dragged on. The door was getting smaller and smaller. Ning Shu consumed all the strength in his body just to be able to pass through the door. A huge hand grabbed him. It was such a hand that directly crushed the little mouse. If he was caught, he would definitely die. Fa Tian turned into a light and rushed out with Ning Shu just as the door was about to close. However, Ning Shu's body was stuck. To watch the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39-23. With his legs stuck, Fa Tian couldn't move Ning Shu. Ning Shu hardened his heart and cut off his own legs. His soul was already transparent to begin with, and now it was even harder to see. The giant hand directly penetrated the wall and grabbed Ning Shu and the others. The giant hand was like heaven and earth. No matter where they ran, it would catch them. Fa Tian said, "We can't escape like this. We can only escape if we shield ourselves." Ning Shu knew that this giant beast would follow them like a shadow even if it chased them to the ends of the earth. Unless it could catch something, it couldn't. It was just like how the little mouse ran into the giant hand in order to save Li Wen, allowing Li Wen to escape. Now they were facing the same situation. Fa Tian transformed from a whip into a human form. However, one of his legs was missing. It was empty. He stood on one leg. Previously, he was 7 or 8 years old. Now, he looked like he was 4 or 5 years old. He was even smaller than when he transformed. Ning Shu's tears immediately flowed out. Fa Tian's face was extremely pale, and his eyes were filled with pain and exhaustion. He said to Ning Shu, "Do you have a way to block it for a while? I'll draw a rune to hide our presence." "I'll try, the law of water is useless. That's only the power of the small plane world. It's a very low-level power. It can't hide our presence," Fa Tian said hurriedly. "It was the law, not the law. Don't cry. I'm in pain, so I have to comfort you." Ning Shu wiped his face in panic. "I'm not crying. I'm not crying. I'll block it." Even if it was for Fa Tian to draw the rune, it would be good if he could escape. If both of them couldn't escape, then at least one of them could. The hand came closer and closer, and it was as if the world had darkened. It grabbed at them with an irresistible power that looked down on the world. Fa Tian sat down. Without his other leg, his movements were slow and staggered. He wasn't used to it yet. He began to draw divine runes. Ning Shu bit his lips tightly. From the very beginning, their strength had been severely damaged. Their chances of defeating Grand Elder were already small, and now their chances were even smaller. Ning Shu felt that he might die here. He glanced at Fa Tian behind him. He was too small and thin. "I just want to live, that's all." She had never thought of seizing power, nor had she ever thought of seizing their things for herself. He just wanted to live. He never thought about stealing the power of the Taishuha organization. Since her hands and nails could hurt the Grand Elder, then she had some power to resist such power, even if it was just to buy some time for Fa Tian. She saw the little mouse collide with the giant hand for Li Wen. At that time, she did not understand because Li Wen was really cold to the little mouse. But now she understood that some people were worth protecting with her life, just because of that little bit of warmth. That little bit of warmth could warm her devastated heart. Peerless martial arts were also things. It didn't matter if she gave it away, but her heart was not reconciled. She was hurt and would not disappear. They were not wrong, but she deserved to be hurt. Because she was not reconciled, she would not compromise even if she had to die together with them. She had no sense of belonging to this organization. She had no feelings. Why should she give up what she had for an emotionless person or thing? If she had suffered less, she might have stayed here. She might have suffered a little and really given it away. Go fucking die. Ning Shu clenched his fists, his expression resolute. He faced the giant hand without hesitation. When his fist met the giant hand, Ning Shu felt as if he had been hit by a giant hammer. His whole consciousness cracked. Ning Shu was dizzy. His soul could not bear such power and began to dissipate inch by inch. The Grand Elder in the mural was rebounded by the power and took a few steps back. He frowned with a cold expression. He raised his hand and clenched his fingers. The giant hand grabbed hard. It burst out with even more power, causing Ning Shu's soul to collapse even faster. Ning Shu's consciousness began to blur. He looked back at Fa Tian with difficulty. Every time he saw Fa Tian's broken leg, Ning Shu's nose would turn sour. If his consciousness dissipated, would a new Ning Shu be born? Would he disappear from then on? Ning Shu looked at the giant hand that was pressing down on him. There was no way to escape. The enormous and majestic power made him unable to move. He was like a dead fish on a chopping board. He couldn't beat it. He couldn't avoid death. Ning Shu's soul and consciousness were on the verge of collapse. She sneered. "Even if I die, I won't let you have a good time." She didn't even use the will of death like this. "Aren't you trying to find a way to live? I want you to die faster." Ning Shu used the will of death and cursed word by word. Her voice was very hoarse. "Grand Elder, I curse you. You will rot and die. You will struggle at death's door. You will rot and become a pile of rotten meat. The power of the will of death was like a black line, spreading along the giant hand toward the Grand Elder. Seeing the black line, the Grand Elder's face changed. His expression was cold and cruel. The giant hand squeezed. Under the enormous and insurmountable power, Ning Shu's soul exploded into pieces. His consciousness also collapsed. With a pang sound, it exploded and turned into specks of light before disappearing. Before his consciousness dissipated, Ning Shu thought that only death could free him from this inexplicable responsibility. He didn't ask for her opinion and walked on this path. It was like a person who couldn't choose his parents. No matter what happened, there would always be a pressure on him. Because of the kindness of giving birth and raising, she was born by relying on the organization. The organization gave her the opportunity to be strong. She had the opportunity to be strong because of the organization. It seemed that everything she had was because of the organization. No matter what happened, no matter what she endured, there were no parents in the world. No matter what she did, she couldn't repay the kindness of the organization. Since that was the case, she would repay it with her death. Only by dying could she leave the organization. In fact, the organization had never lied to her because no one left the organization. She thought that she could become the number one person. There was no number one person. There was only one more corpse on top of the layers of bones. Since the day she entered the organization, she had been running for her life. She had expected that she would die. Probably because of Murphy's Law, she had always had this premonition in her heart. She had always felt that she would die. This day had finally come. With the last of her strength, Ning Shu looked back at Fa Tian. He looked at Ning Shu blankly. Ning Shu tried to comfort him with a smile. Only Fa Tian could complete the mission for her. She was unconscious. From now on, there was no more Ning Shu in this world. Fa Tian bit his pale lips tightly and finished the last stroke of the sacred sigil. He took out a bottle and collected a little powder. He looked at the giant hand in the air and turned to leave resolutely. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39-24. Grains of black sand fell from the giant hand and landed on the ground. They were mixed in the soil and sand and were not very obvious. They drifted with the wind and drifted to every corner of the world. They drifted in every corner of the void. The Grand Elder looked coldly at the black line on his fingertips. It carried the power of the curse. Because of the power of disappointment, the power of the curse became stronger. Unable to detect the aura of the whip, the Grand Elder took back the giant beast and gave up tracking it. It was just a god-beating whip. What happened? Sang Liang raised his eyebrows and looked at the Grand Elder. There was nothing behind him. He did not bring the person back. The Grand Elder said coldly, "She resisted like crazy. Like a mad dog, I accidentally killed her." Sang Liang frowned tightly. What about that world? It was annihilated with her. He had given her a way to live, but she did not take it. If she wanted to die, then she should die. Sang Liang was silent. The lack of a backup source of vitality was quite a big problem. It was still in the experimental stage. He did not know if the experiment would be successful. He did not feel so anxious to have a backup. Besides, she was the master of the belief world. No matter how stupid she would have some understanding of the world's formation. Asking her would save him some trouble. But it was useless to say this now. She was already dead. Sang Liang felt a little pity and let it go. There was always a way. There was enough time to slowly experiment. You have a lot of resentment. She cursed you before she died. Curses were a kind of power, especially when people with power cursed before they died. Half of their life was probably used to curse. To be honest, her fate was within Sang Liang's expectations. People with power wanted to control their own fate, but her strength was not enough for her to successfully control her own life. Handing over the eggs did not necessarily mean killing the hen. However, the hen had to make a fuss. No one would benefit from it. It was such a big grievance. Using one's life as a bet. The Grand Elder raised his hand and showed Sang Liang his finger. The black line spread on his fingertips. This was just the beginning. If it was not dealt with, the power of the curse would spread to his whole body. It would not kill him, but it would make him suffer. Sang Liang said, "Let uncle get something to remove the curse. It's not good to leave it in the body." Seeing the grand uncle lying down again, Sang Liang said, "I'll talk to him." Sang Liang turned around and left. After some thought, he went to the place where Jingqing was locked up. He said to the energetic Jingqing, "Your dog bones are gone." Jingqing didn't react for a moment. "What do you mean?" Sang Liang, he told him that he didn't have any dog bones. Otherwise, he would keep tormenting him, but the other party was too slow. Sang Liang couldn't be bothered with him. It was a mistake for him to come here. After a while, Jingqing reacted and shouted at Sang Liang's back, "Fuck, you guys ate my men. Spit them out, you bitches." Sang Liang's footsteps didn't even pause as he left. The black smoke kept hitting the barrier. Impossible. How did he find my place? How did he get in? All of you bitches. Jingqing was very unwilling to give up. Finally, he could find something that could make his condition better and not be controlled by the Grand Elder. In the end, it was eaten by them in advance. Jingqing was about to go crazy with anger. He hated the Grand Uncle bitterly. Why did he have to be coerced by the Grand Uncle? Why? What the hell? Even if they both crawled out from the sea of laws, you walk your path while I walk my path. What right do you have to interfere with me? Fuck you. If you don't want to die, then I will die. We were both born from the sea of laws. So what if we die together? What's so great about you? You should live. Jingqing was so angry that his fluctuations were huge, causing his strength to dissipate. Jingqing was instantly stunned. He carefully scolded without daring to breathe. "Bastard, return it to me. Return it to me." Fa Tian hurried back to the cub nursery and took away everything that was placed there. Dong Lan, who was sitting by the pond licking a lollipop, saw Fa Tian and immediately jumped in front of him. She asked, "Fa Tian, what happened to you? What happened to your legs? Why did you become smaller?" Fa Tian smiled with a pale face. He asked the old man Divine Tree for a branch. He ignored Dong Lan and looked at the old man Divine Tree. The old man Divine Tree saw his miserable state and asked, "What happened? Did you have a conflict with the void creatures?" Fa Tian grinned. "Grandpa Tree, can you give me a branch? I need it to save someone." Fa Tian pouted and said with a sobbing tone, "Ning Shu is dead. She's dead." Dong Lan was startled. "Is she the one who brought us things?" The old man Divine Tree was speechless. Life was truly fickle. Not long ago, she was still comprehending the divine runes in his spiritual space. However, her aptitude was rather poor. Until now, she had not grasped a single thread. However, she was no longer here and he still ridiculed her aptitude. It was a little unkind. The old man Divine Tree plucked a branch and gave it to Fa Tian. "Take it. However, she's already dead. My condolences." Fa Tian took the things and left in a hurry. Dong Lan followed behind him. Fa Tian turned back and looked at her. "Why are you following me?" He was now a fugitive. He was not going out to play. Why was Dong Lan following him? He did not have the energy to deal with her. Dong Lan looked at Fa Tian worriedly. I'm worried about you. What happened to you? What happened to your leg? Fatian replied, I'm fine. Don't follow me. Dong Lan shook her head. I want to follow you. You look so weak now. If you encounter any danger, you won't be able to resist. I'm by your side and can block it for you. Fatian coldly rejected. No need. Thank you for your kind intentions. He did not want to say much to her. She knew that he was a cub from the cub nursery. It was very likely that they would come to the cub nursery to capture him. Perhaps they did not even put him in their eyes. However, he had to be cautious. Moreover, he had more important things to do. Fatian did not even listen to Dong Lan's words. He turned and left. Dong Lan was very worried about Fatian. Fatian was in a sorry state with a broken leg. His face was filled with panic and violence. Fatian was probably very sad about the death of the kitchen maid. Dong Lan pondered for a moment before catching up to Heaven Punisher. She was extremely fast. With a splash, she swam out of sight like a fish in water. She quickly caught up with Fatian. When Fatian saw her, he was very annoyed. Didn't I tell you not to follow me? Someone is chasing me. It's very dangerous to stay by my side. Dong Lan's eyes lit up. Is it that exciting? To watch the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39-25. Take me with you, take me with you. Dong Lan was very excited. I can definitely protect you well, don't worry. Fatian was really annoyed by her playful attitude. This was not a game, this was a matter of life and death. No, or I won't be polite to you. Fatian clutched the necklace in his chest tightly while looking around to observe the situation of his sacred glyphs. Fatian didn't have the heart to take care of such a carefree young lady. You're already like this, how can you be rude to me? I know it's very serious, but one more person means one more power. Fatian sneered. More people meant more power. Sometimes, power could not be measured by numbers. Even if they had East Blue, it would still be useless. Unless Dong Lan's elders thought that this world was very safe. Dong Lan was just a little girl now. Fatian turned and left. One of his legs was missing, and it looked very distressing. Dong Lan still followed behind him. Fatian sneered. He had already warned her that she was in danger, but she still wanted to follow. If anything happened, he couldn't blame her. Dong Lan secretly looked at Fatian. Seeing that Fatian didn't stop her from following, she immediately smiled and followed Fatian to a hidden cave. Dong Lan looked at the cave and asked Fatian excitedly, "Is this your secret base?" Fatian ignored her and entered the cave. He took out a bottle and began to mix mud. He only collected a little, but the situation was too dangerous. Dong Lan saw that Fatian's face was extremely pale and one of his legs was missing. She suggested, "Fatian, you should rest for a while. You're very tired now, and there might be a problem." Fatian frowned. Dong Lan thought that Fatian would ignore her. After all, she was a bit used to Fatian's cold attitude. Fatian always said that she was childish, shallow, and laughable. That was because she thought that Fatian was always acting like an old man. He was so young, so why did he make himself so old? Boring. Fatian nodded. Then I'll rest for a while. You should go back. It's very dangerous to follow me. However, Dong Lan suppressed her excitement and said calmly, "I'm not a fool. If there's danger, I'll know to run." Fatian said, "Don't touch my things." He leaned against the stone wall and began to rest. Dong Lan had nothing to do, so she wandered around the cave. The cave was very deep, and there were all kinds of intersecting paths at the bottom. The sea extended in all directions. Even if one got lost, they could still find their way through the currents. But in the dry land, Dong Lan beautifully got lost in the crisscrossing underground tunnels. When Fa Tian woke up, he heard Dong Lan's cries for help. He calmly began to play with the mud. He was especially careful because there was only so much of it, and there was only one chance. If he failed, he would completely fail, and there would be no more chances. Fa Tian was so nervous that his hands began to tremble. The area where his leg was broken was very painful. His face, which had looked slightly better because of the rest, was now very ugly. He was very careful, step by step. He was not as casual as he had been when meeting Little Mouse. He finally made the mud ball, and now he had to knead Ning Shu. Fa Tian was much more familiar with Ning Shu than he was with Little Mouse. When he kneaded it, it was very smooth. Soon, a mud ball of Ning Shu appeared. He carefully put it down. Next, he would draw the divine pattern. Previously, when he had made the Little Mouse, he had drawn it casually. But when he drew it for Ning Shu, he crushed the leaves of the tree of God, squeezed out the juice, and dipped it in the juice to draw the divine pattern. The effect of the divine pattern was doubled. Naturally, he wanted to give Ning Shu a better body. He did not want her to be at a disadvantage because of her birth and constitution. Fa Tian's hands were trembling. He grabbed his wrist to prevent his hands from trembling. Stroke by stroke, he seriously drew the divine pattern. He ignored Dong Lan's miserable and sharp cries for help. When the divine pattern was finished, he took out some powder and smeared it on the mud ball. As long as there was a slight change in her vitality, she would have a chance to wake up. Under heaven's expectant gaze, the clay statue began to crack. Cracks began to appear on its surface, and in the end, it crumbled into dust. How can this be? Fa Tian's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He was angry and confused. Why did it fail? How could it fail? Everything was clearly done according to the steps. He had already revived Little Mouse before. Why was it that when everyone else succeeded, she was the only one who failed? Dong Lan crawled out of the tunnel with a dirty face. When she saw Fa Tian's horrified expression, her heart trembled. She hurriedly said, "Don't be anxious." She looked at the powder. If one time doesn't work, then try again. You have to be calm. Fortunately, she was by Fa Tian's side. Otherwise, with Fa Tian's current state of mind, who knew what would happen? She was still somewhat useful. Fa Tian was very uncomfortable. He had never been so frustrated before. This feeling of frustration made his heart feel gloomy. Previously, he was controlled by the Grand Elder and was forced to self-harm. This caused his strength to drop sharply. Now, Ning Shu couldn't be revived. This was the first time since Fa Tian was born that his confidence had been damaged. He felt helpless and sullen. Fa Tian collected the powder again and planned to make it again. This time, he would be more careful. He should succeed. He was so nervous that his mind went blank. He almost couldn't remember how to make it. Dong Lan took out some candy and gave it to Fa Tian. Eat something. Eating something sweet would make one feel better. Dong Lan looked at the powder on the table. She's already dead. Why did she revive? Is she still herself? Actually, she's just a memory carrier. She can't be considered a living creature. Dong Lan felt that this was a puppet. Fa Tian didn't speak. He curled up one leg and the other leg was empty. Fa Tian closed his eyes to rest. When he saw Dong Lan about to grab the powder, he quickly stopped her. Don't touch it. Dong Lan quickly retracted her hand. I just want to keep it for you. Don't touch it, Fa Tian said tiredly. Dong Lan, okay, I won't touch it. I'll help you look after it. We're good friends now. We've been through so much. Fa Tian, little girl. After Fa Tian woke up, he continued to make the clay statue. However, at the last moment, the statue broke. He tried again and again. There was nothing wrong with the steps. There was nothing wrong. Why couldn't it succeed? Fa Tian grabbed his hair. His eyes were scarlet and his expression was irritable. What went wrong? Why didn't it succeed? Why? Dong Lan looked at Fa Tian and didn't know how to comfort him. She said, "This is probably God's will. There's no way to succeed." Fa Tian asked unwillingly, "Why can other creatures do it?" To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39-26. Fa Tian tried again and again, but the results were the same. The worst thing was that the mud was getting less and less, and the clay figurine was getting smaller and smaller. Sometimes, Fa Tian couldn't even carve the facial features in detail. The face was blurry, lifeless, and not lifelike. Even if she was revived, it would be very ugly. Most importantly, there might be no way to revive her successfully. The more he tried, the lower the chances of revival. In the end, the powder and mud might not be able to be molded into a human shape. Fa Tian was in despair. If he tried, the mud would get smaller and smaller, and the chances of success would be even lower. But if he didn't do it, it would be even more impossible for her to revive. The clay figurine crumbled again. Fa Tian was so angry that he wanted to flip the table. But everything was on the table. If he threw everything away, there would be no hope at all. Fa Tian was about to cry. Why didn't it work? Why didn't it work? What was the problem? He was so angry that he punched the wall. All his anger came from his incompetence. Because of his incompetence, he couldn't get what he wanted, so he was especially angry. What the fuck was wrong? Was there anyone who could tell him? Dong Lan saw Fa Tian's angry roar. His facial features were distorted, and it was terrifying. Dong Lan started to cry. When the tears fell, she even used her hands to catch them. Fa Tian looked at her in annoyance. "I'm not targeting you. Why are you crying?" Dong Lan handed the teardrop in her hand to Fa Tian. "Why don't you add something? My tears are very good. No one knows this secret. Don't tell anyone." Fa Tian looked at the teardrop in her hand. It was round, like a dewdrop on a lotus leaf. It rolled around and looked very cute. Fa Tian was speechless. Whose tears were in the shape of water droplets? They didn't fall apart. It was the legendary bead teardrop. Dong Lan thought that Fa Tian didn't believe her and said, "It's true. I'm not lying to you. Our clan has a talent. I don't usually tell people." Fa Tian frowned as he took the bead. What's the use of it? He didn't really dare to use it. He had added in all sorts of things. What if something went wrong? What if he broke it? His production steps were obtained through repeated experiments. If he added things of unknown origin and use, it was very likely that all his efforts would be in vain. Now, every time he tried, the chances of success decreased. They couldn't afford to be tested. Dong Lan didn't want to explain the use of her tears. She raised her hand and swore, "It really works. Trust me. When have you ever seen me cry? My tears are very precious. Mermaid tears." Fa Tian raised his eyebrows and asked. Dong Lan was stunned for a moment. What kind of person is a mermaid? But that mermaid definitely can't compare to me, really. If the thing you added to me still fails, I advise you to give up. The failure is not because of the materials, but because she cannot be revived in the first place. Dong Lan promised, "I won't joke about such an important matter." Fa Tian's expression was still very doubtful, but he still joined in and started experimenting again. What if her things were really useful? He had already failed so many times. He didn't lack any steps or materials. Perhaps he would succeed with just a few more things. After adding in Dong Lan's tears, he started to work. At the end, he finished drawing the divine pattern. Fa Tian almost held his breath as he looked at the clay sculpture. The clay sculpture didn't break apart like before. Fa Tian's face revealed a smile. Looks like it really works. Dong Lan heaved a sigh of relief. It was good that it worked. She was afraid that Fa Tian would continue experimenting like this. There would be no end to it. He would go crazy. I've already given you my most precious thing. Can we be considered friends now? Dong Lan asked with a smile. Just as Fa Tian was about to say something, he saw the clay statue crumble. It turned into small pieces of clay. This was still mud. Before, it had already turned into sand. It could be seen that Dong Lan's tears had quite the solidifying power. But even so, it still couldn't stop the clay sculpture from collapsing. The smile and pride on Dong Lan's face froze. She became as confused as Fa Tian. This shouldn't be. It shouldn't be like this. Dong Lan didn't know whether to comfort herself or Fa Tian. How could the precious thing she was so proud of become like this? Fa Tian's face was numb. What exactly did she want? What exactly did she want? Where did she go wrong? What was she missing? Fa Tian gritted his teeth. The muscles on his face trembled. He collected the ashes and put them in a bottle. Dong Lan watched as Fa Tian calmly put away the things. It seemed like he had stopped, but the atmosphere was very tense. It was the calm before the storm. Dong Lan carefully asked, "You're not doing it anymore?" Fa Tian smiled. However, the muscles on his face spasmed. His smile was very sinister. "I'm afraid I'll go crazy if I continue." He was going crazy with anger. He had never been so angry before. Since he couldn't do it now, he would wait a little longer and find some better materials. Perhaps he could succeed. Dong Lan, that's good. You need to rest. Dong Lan looked at his leg. Can your leg grow back? Fa Tian, no. Dong Lan exclaimed, how ugly would it be if you lost a leg? Children's words were the most naive, but at the same time, they were the most hurtful. Fa Tian wasn't touched at all. He could still speak, he could still be angry, and he could still be called ugly by others. But some people couldn't jump or walk. They didn't even have the right to be called ugly. Perhaps if he had enough strength, his leg would be able to grow back. But now, he didn't have the heart to grow back this leg. This was a disgrace. He had to keep it to remind himself at all times. If he couldn't find a way to revive her, this leg would be crippled and broken. I want to rest now. You can go. After experiencing intense emotional turmoil and escaping, Fa Tian was very tired and needed to rest. Until now, he still felt like he was dreaming. She was clearly such a lively person, but she was gone just like that. It was so sudden. He thought that she could survive. Now, he was all alone. Dong Lan said angrily, why are you like this? If you want to rest, I can help you look around the dangerous situation. When you see that I'm useless, you chase me away. Fa Tian chuckled. What kind of hobby do you have to watch people sleep and rest? He wasn't in the mood to play with her now. To her, it was a novel experience, but to others, it was a matter of life and death. He couldn't empathize with her. Besides, there was no such thing as empathy in this world. Even for Ning Shu, he couldn't empathize with her. All he had was confusion and disappointment. Chapter 39-27 He didn't understand her concerns and actions. He didn't understand why she kept dragging her feet. She had the heart but didn't do anything. Everyone knew that it wasn't good to stay in this organization, but it wasn't easy to leave. She used her life to prove that there was no way to leave this organization. Now that she left, she didn't even have her life. Therefore, in this world, there was no empathy. There was only self-righteousness. He was too self-righteous. Fatian glanced at her and rested on the stone table. Donglan carefully ran out of Shandong without making a sound. She was going to find some fruits for Fatian. Fatian looked up from his arm and glanced at Donglan's back. He put everything in the spatial ring and left. He wouldn't bring her along if there was nothing. If something happened, Donglan's elders would definitely find trouble with him in Donglan Sea. Now he had to stay alive to find something that could revive Ning Shu. It was probably because his body was too weak. In the past, he revived void creatures, so his foundation was there. However, Ning Shu was a transparent, weak soul. To be able to leave behind such a small amount of ashes was probably because of his peerless martial arts. He probably needed some heaven-defying treasure to change his fate. Now he couldn't go back to the Holy Land. If that organization wanted to capture him, he wouldn't be able to resist. Fatian couldn't deny this reality. He could only hide the grievances in his heart for now. At this time Fatian felt a little empathetic. Because he was helpless, because he couldn't resist, he had no choice but to do something against his will. It was really fucking annoying. If he had the strength, he would directly kill that organization and turn them upside down. Donglan came back and saw that the cave was empty. She was so angry that she threw the fruits. The fruits rolled all over the ground. What was wrong with her? She was always like this. Shameless bastard. He took the things and left without even saying a word to her. Donglan picked up the fruits on the ground and wiped them on her body. She took a bite and disappeared into the cave. Fatian walked aimlessly in the void. He only had the appearance of a 4 or 5-year-old. He had to carefully avoid other void creatures. His body was E's weapon. Although it couldn't eat him, it would inevitably become someone else's weapon. It only had one and didn't want to become someone else's weapon. In a way, he owed Ning Shu his life. If he accidentally became someone else's weapon, he wouldn't be able to go out and find things. Fatian understand that with the things in his hands, there was no way to revive Ning Shu. He had traveled through many places and reached cliffs that were infinitely high. If he could not reach the top, he would not be able to climb any further. He dived into the deep sea to find things that he had only heard of but had never seen before. He had been to too many places and walked through many places. His clothes were old and torn by something. She's ss'd when she tsss when she's tttt when she was twen she teet. If she couldn't ttts'd, it would have popped out when she stopped looking. Fatian kept the giants in his mustard seed space. It was something he'd always wanted. Maybe he'd be happy to see it when he woke up. Although he might not need it, he could be happy. The things that one hoped for and wanted to have were actually things that one could have. Fatian carefully kept the small amount of powder. He didn't dare to mix it with other powders. Fatian thought about it again. If he mixed it with the ashes of other living beings when they were annihilated with hers, he might succeed. It was because hers was too weak that it couldn't take shape. Fatian ate a lot of things in order to replenish his lost strength. However, energy bodies weren't easy to find. Fatian hadn't found one yet. If he did, it would be easy to make up for it. During his days of wandering, Fatian didn't regrow his broken leg. Firstly, he didn't want to. Secondly, he didn't have enough strength to do so. Fatian sewed and patched up his clothes. His clothes were so tattered that they couldn't even cover his body. When Ning Shu was here, he never thought about living alone. Although he was always running around in the void, there was still a place for him. But at the end of the day, there was still a place to go. There was someone waiting for him. It was completely different from the feeling of being alone. Fa Tian patched up his clothes until they couldn't be sewn anymore. Then he changed to another one. Ning Shu had prepared clothes for him in his mustard seed space. Even if they were old clothes, he wanted to keep them. It would be a pity to throw them away. He never thought he'd have to worry about clothes one day. Poverty stunted ambition. As for food, there was no need to think about dessert. There was dried meat in his mustard seed space. He used to think it was dry and ordinary. Now, he only wanted to taste it. He would put one or two in his mouth and taste it. It was fine as long as he could eat it. In fact, he didn't need much food. However, his body lacked energy. It would be great if he could eat energy bodies. However, he didn't have such things. Fa Tian avoided the vicinity of the Sea of Law. They were all busy people and might have forgotten about it. However, Fa Tian didn't dare to gamble because the price was too high. It could be his life. It could be his freedom. If he couldn't afford to gamble, he wouldn't dare to gamble. Fa Tian kept walking and searching. He didn't know where his destination was. He didn't know when he would end his wandering. He didn't know if he could find that thing. He only heard a few legends and he wanted to search for it. It was too uncertain. He was exhausted. When he stopped to rest, he couldn't control his tears. He sniffled and wiped his tears. He still wanted to run towards his unknown destination. Being at a loss without any gains might be a waste of effort. However, even if there was a little hope, even if it was really a waste of effort, he still had to do it. If he didn't do anything, he wouldn't be able to change anything. Fa Tian was being chased by a group of strange life forms. He was chewing on a fruit that he picked from the life form's territory. The fruit was rare and sweet. It was filled with energy. This energy was what Fa Tian needed. Risking being chased, Fa Tian entered the life form's territory and picked the fruit. Amidst the shouts and roars behind him, Fa Tian chewed on the fruit and ran. He laughed happily. He had only obtained a few fruits with energy. In the past, when he had the energy bodies, he wasn't that happy. It was probably because it was too easy to obtain them. He knew that those things were obtained by Ning Shu after spending a lot of effort, but he didn't feel much about it. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39-28. It was a completely different feeling when he had to obtain every stitch and piece of thread by himself. Fa Tian ran as fast as he could, breaking away from his pursuers. As he laughed, the smile on his face disappeared. Sometimes, he wanted to be happy, but his brain was like a masochist. When he was happy, he had to remember some unhappy things. So now, he was a little unhappy. Fa Tian took a bite of the fruit and continued to laugh. In the void, he turned into a shooting star and disappeared into the distance. The void was too big and too empty. It was so empty that Fa Tian didn't know where to go. He didn't know how long he had been through. Undoubtedly, these days were hard to endure. Anyway, Fa Tian felt that many years had passed. Hundreds of years, 1,000 years, or even more. This was because the jerky in the meson space, which was one stick a day, was now gone. The jerky made from so many birds was gone. He had no clothes to wear. He had become a wild man who covered his body with fur. Even so, he still couldn't roam the void every time. It seemed that he was only wandering around in size. He wanted to go further and find more ancient legends. During this time, he didn't dare to make mud dolls. He had a feeling that he wouldn't succeed in Freedom Island. The remaining ashes weren't enough to support his unscrupulous experiments. He didn't have much hope. As long as Ning Shu was alive, even if she didn't have a strong constitution, he didn't have the ambition he had before. He wanted to make a powerful body for her. Failure after failure lowered his standards. In the end, he only had one request, to be alive. But this request was probably the most difficult. Fa Tian was like a twinkling star, disappearing in the blink of an eye. He didn't know where he went or when he would return. In a space of faith, the law of nothingness was surging. The transparent law of nothingness became more and more turbulent, as if wanting to drown this space. However, the law of nothingness didn't develop in the direction of vitality. Instead, it was about to swallow this space and merge with it. In the air, the Taishu and Sang Liang looked down at the surging law of nothingness. Both of them were expressionless, but Sang Liang's brows were knitted together. I failed. Sooner or later, this space of faith would be devoured, and the law of nothingness would have to be taken away. If this continued, who knew how many more things the law of nothingness would devour? Facing the power of the law of nothingness, the space of faith was powerless to retaliate. Let alone maintaining balance, the space of faith couldn't even resist the law of nothingness's devouring. This was a new problem. The space of faith might not be able to resist the devouring of the law of nothingness. Could it be that too much of the law of nothingness had been invested, causing the space of faith to be unable to bear the burden and retreat? This space of faith could be considered useless. Sang Liang pondered. What proportion of the law of nothingness should he invest? The Grand Elder didn't say anything. He glanced around and left. Sang Liang put away the law of nothingness. The crumbling faith space collapsed and turned into a pile of fragments. Sang Liang put away the fragments, walked to the Grand Uncle, and said, "This needs to be tested. My opinion is that we should just give up on these planes." The Grand Elder paused for a moment, slowed down, and said, "You still don't understand. Without these planes, these large number of mission enforcers will have nothing to do." Sang Liang said indifferently, "If the skin doesn't exist, what can the hair attach to? Since the things they are guarding are gone, their duty is still like this." The Grand Elder shook his head. "You still don't understand. Even if new ones are born and diverted, it's still necessary for these planes to exist. These mission enforcers, this organization, are a wall that I built for the Sea of Law. There are too many people coveting the Sea of Law that is exposed to the outside world. The birth of these planes in the Sea of Law is a responsibility and a mission. The slightly qualified people selected from these planes are the people who block the invaders. I was born in the Sea of Law and obtained power from it. However, I can't always be by the side of the Sea of Law. But if I leave, my back, the source of power, will be threatened. Many of the birthplaces of planes and worlds that were exposed to the outside world had been eaten clean. The Grand Elder was powerful, but in the face of birds, monkeys, and even some flies and mosquitoes that wanted to peck at the fruit at any time and place. As a normal person, they wouldn't always guard around the fruit tree. Having an existence that could disperse these covetous people and stay by the fruit tree at all times was very useful. He coexisted with these planes. It wasn't that the situation would be better if he gave up these planes. He was destined to be connected to the Sea of Law. There was no way to cut it off. If there was a problem with the fruit tree, they had to start from the fruit tree and not kill the cats and dogs that looked at the fruit tree. As for the planes that were born by relying on the Sea of Law, it didn't matter if they were destroyed. If they weren't destroyed, they would naturally stay and not be destroyed directly. Sang Liang was even more indifferent. The fruit tree must be pruned. Too many branches will only absorb more energy. If there are withered branches, there will be new branches. It's a balance, the Grand Elder said. The general direction was correct, but some people were the victims of this general direction. And the victims of strength were not willing to sacrifice. The collision of personal will and the will of everyone, the collision of personal interests and the interests of everyone. If the sea of law could be successfully diverted, it would be a good thing for this plane and this organization. However, it wouldn't be a good thing for the victims. There was no perfect solution in the world that was in everyone's interest. Sang Liang sighed and stopped arguing with the Grand Elder. He changed the topic and said, "Find a new space of faith. This time, invest less of the law of nothingness. If there is a catalyst, it might be able to form a space with vitality faster. Adding a bit of the original power of the plane's birthplace could speed up the birth time. Simply put, it was like making pickles. Adding a bit of old pickle water could ensure the success of a jar of pickles and also reduce the time. It wouldn't cause a jar of pickles to fail because of some fermentation problems." The Grand Elder said, "He's already dead. Why are you saying this?" Sang Liang grinned. "Isn't it a pity? It's a pity that there's vitality in the space of faith. If there was vitality, too many problems would be solved." The Grand Elder nodded. "It's quite a pity. If he did it again, he would be gentler. He wouldn't destroy the space of faith. He just had to kill the person. If he didn't kill the dog that bit him, he wouldn't be able to celebrate the new year." To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3929. This person had been dead for a long time. If she didn't have the faith space, she would have almost forgotten about this person. It was the world that Sang Liang was always thinking about. He always looked very regretful and sighed in front of him. Sang Liang said to the Grand Uncle, "I heard that there's a place that's about to give birth to life. It's been a long time since the last birth. I think you can go and take it back and eat it to nourish your body." This kind of life sounded like a soul, but it wasn't. It was a kind of energy born in the void, and it was a kind of plant with a lot of vitality. Eating it could provide a lot of energy for void creatures, especially for a body like the Grand Uncle's. It was best to eat it. It was a very pure and rare thing. The Grand Uncle said, "Oh." Sang Liang frowned. "Don't take it to heart. Go and look for it when the time comes. I don't know the specific location yet. When you know the location, go and look for it." The Grand Uncle said, "Oh." A huge stone man was looking for food in the void. When he saw a little girl sitting on a stone, she looked at her hand in disappointment. When she saw the stone man, her face showed a vigilant look. The stone man said in a muffled voice, "How could the void give birth to such a weak child?" The stone man obviously felt that this child was a little underdeveloped. He handed her the fruit in his hand and the twisted earthworm-like food. The little girl's face showed a surprised expression. She glanced at the stone man and took the fruit. She didn't take the earthworm-like insect. This thing looked really unappetizing. The fruit was very sweet. The stone man's body was covered with moss. He was like a moving mountain. He looked very familiar. The stone man said, "How long have you been born? Why are you alone? Don't you have a race? You look a bit like a low-level intelligent human when you were born." "That's right. You're so weak. It means that the power that gave birth to you isn't strong enough to give birth to other races. Do you have any talent skills? No, then you're a bit useless. But it doesn't matter. You can treat it with food. The void doesn't have much, but there are a lot of delicious and energy-rich things. You don't have a race, do you have any plans? A newborn like you with pure energy will be eaten by other races." She said, "I might be me, or I might not be me. I don't know who I am, but the past is engraved in my mind. I don't have anything left. Actually, I still have one more thing, which is the tumor in my brain." The stone man was unable to make an expression, but his eyes were filled with sympathy. "You are still sick, your body is weak. Ning Shu, she finished eating the fruit, wiped the juice off her hands, and asked, "What time is it now?" Stone Golem was very confused. What? What? She couldn't ask anymore because the lifespan of void creatures was too long. They didn't know how to count or record how long they had lived. In any case, they lived for a very long time. Ning Shu didn't know how she woke up. She was sure that she was already dead at that time. As for why she woke up, she didn't know. She didn't know if it was a new personality because it was as if she had slept for a long time and suddenly woke up. She didn't even know who she was. Anyway, she was no longer a member of the dream organization. Stone Golem said that her body was weak because it was severely damaged by the peerless martial arts. Now, the brain tumors were like grains. Ning Shu had a splitting headache. Reality and illusion overlapped in her mind, making her unable to face who she was. The more she thought about it, the harder it was to calm down. It was like her, but also not like her. She had nothing left. She couldn't feel the power of the will of death. The world tree that was once planted in her soul was gone. The brain tumor that was the size of a ping-pong ball was also gone now. It was precisely because the things that she once had no longer existed that she couldn't help but feel suspicious. Ning Shu asked, "You said I'm a cub?" Cub, a cub of the void? Did she become a void creature? Was it because of the peerless martial arts? Ning Shu called for Fatan and the god-beating whip, but there was no response. There was no response at all. They were completely cut off. There was nothing. What else did she have? Stone Golem Ning Shu stretched out a huge stone hand. Ning Shu hugged her head and looked blankly at the hand that was put down. The huge stone hand stopped above Ning Shu's head. She lowered her head and looked at the huge hand. After thinking for a while, she understood and jumped into the stone golem's hand. Ning Shu felt that her brain wasn't enough. Maybe it was because she slept for too long that her brain was stiff. Or maybe she didn't have a brain. Stone Golem placed Ning Shu on his shoulder and began to walk step by step. Stone Golem walked very slowly, but his steps were very big. Ning Shu had actually seen this Stone Golem before. That was when she met him when she went to collect metal with Li Wen and the others. The stones on his body were all made of metal, and they were lumpy together. Standing very high, she could see very far. It was as if the world was under her feet. Ning Shu raised her hand and put it by her mouth to shout, "I, Hu Han-san, am back. I'm back. It's over." The empty voice traveled very far. She had a body and was no longer in a soul state. She had no worries, she was a happy madwoman. Oh, I forgot. There was still a Fatan. Where should I go to find Fatan? I can't find the location of the sacred ground. I can't find the cub's place. After shouting, Ning Shu let out a heart-wrenching cough. She immediately clutched her chest and felt that it was very painful. Stone Golem said in a muffled voice, "Your body isn't good. Don't be agitated." Ning Shu made an "oh" sound. The peerless martial art was not in good condition. She, who had fused with the peerless martial art, was not in good condition either. Stone Golem asked, "Cub, what do you want to eat? Milk fruit?" "Yes, yes, yes." She nodded frantically. She found a tree with bright red fruits. Ning Shu jumped down from Stone Golem's shoulder. With a boom, it was like a meteorite hitting the ground, creating a very large crater. Dust flew everywhere. Ning Shu choked and coughed. Cough, cough, cough. Why was her body so weak? The stone man pulled Ning Shu out of the pit and placed her on the ground. He blew at Ning Shu, and her hair was almost blown off. Her face was wrinkled, and ripples were rippling from the wind. "Okay, the dust on your body is clean. Go pick some fruits and eat." Stone Golem said. Ning Shu walked under the tree. She did not want to climb the tree. She hugged the tree and started shaking it, shaking the fruits off the tree. However, when she hugged the tree and exerted her strength, she directly uprooted the tree. With a loud bang, the big tree fell to the ground. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3930. Ning Shu was pinned under the big tree. Miraculously, she wasn't crushed to death by the big tree. Her intestines were smashed through. As a human's instinct, Ning Shu waved her limbs like a tortoise that couldn't turn over. The stone man grabbed the uncle and moved the fruit tree away. Ning Shu sat up and quickly checked her body. It wasn't easy to get this body, so she didn't want to ruin it. Cough, cough, cough. Ning Shu coughed violently. She coughed so hard that her chest hurt. She weakly touched her chest. Sigh, I'm so weak. Even the slightest fluctuation in my emotions hurts. Fuck. Could it be a congenital heart disease? The stone man said to Ning Shu, you have to learn to control your strength. Using too much strength isn't good for your body. Especially when you were born, your energy was too weak, causing you to be a bit useless. Ning Shu nodded obediently. It's like this. I also feel that I'm a bit weak. This body is very weak. The stone man demonstrated to Ning Shu, pulling up a tree as if it was pulling out grass. He said to her, look, when you learn to control your strength in the future, you will be able to pull up a tree as easily as lifting heavy weights. You won't fall on your back. Ning Shu, she felt that something was wrong, but who cares? I'm strong because I'm big, but you're so weak. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing because if you use too much strength, your body won't be able to take it. Ning Shu sighed. It's just that I'm too weak. My body can't take it. From today onwards, I have to take good care of my body. Chrysanthemum soaked with wolfberry. With the stone man's size, who knew how big its stone hands were, it could carefully pick the fruit. It curled up into a ball and picked the fruit that was like a needle compared to its size. He handed the fruit to Ning Shu. Eat, eat more. Ning Shu took the fruit and gnawed on it. She looked at the stone man. She ate and plucked at the same time. When Ning Shu finished eating, she would give a few more to Ning Shu. Ning Shu looked at it. Underneath this stone man's rough appearance was a gentle heart. From the first time they met, it wanted to touch the metal on its body. However, it didn't get angry. Instead, it gave him some metal. Among all the void creatures she had seen, the stone man's personality was the best, the most gentle. As for the old man Divine Tree, although he had a bad temper, he was indeed a good person. Ning Shu's mouth and cheeks were stained with the sweet and greasy juice. He held the big fruit and laughed. He laughed so hard that his eyes couldn't be seen, turning into a crescent shape. The two of them finished all the fruits on the tree. Ning Shu's belly bulged, and he stuck out his tongue to lick the juices. After such a long time, he finally felt full. The satisfaction of being full was transmitted from his stomach to his brain. Oh, this is great. However, now that she had a body, if she ate without restraint, would she become a fat loli? A fat loli that wasn't cute at all. What do I look like? Ning Shu asked the stone man, am I good looking? The stone man paused and said in a more tactful tone, you're just too weak. In fact, looks aren't important. Ning Shu was speechless. Could it be that she was very ugly now? This was a sad thing, but so what? As long as she was happy, it was fine. If looks weren't something that limited her happiness, then the problem of looks wasn't a problem. Yes, I still think the body is more important. Ning Shu nodded in agreement. I want to have a good body. Without waiting for the stone man to reply, Ning Shu said in the next second, this fruit is so delicious. Pick the fruit tree back. The stone man, okay. Ning Shu picked up a towering tree and stuffed it into a hole. Then, he buried the roots with mud. He wanted to water it, but he found that the water law was gone. Not only was the water law gone, but the other laws of earth and wood were also gone. Under the attack of the Grand Elder, those laws couldn't withstand it and had probably all collapsed. Now, except for Ning Shu's body, everything from the past was gone. His peerless martial arts were also in a crippled state. Everything was gone. That was why Ning Shu felt that it was an illusion. Why were those things gone? Was he going to start over again? He had a body, but he was still so weak. The stone man watched from the side. When he saw that Ning Shu had finished planting the tree, he started coughing while leaning on the tree. He coughed until his face flushed red. The stone man, your physique is too weak. Sigh, Ning Shu also sighed. Yes, too weak. He started coughing after doing such a small thing. The stone man plucked a flower and placed it on Ning Shu's head. That flower was very small for the stone man, but it was almost as big as Ning Shu's head. There was a huge flower on top of her head. Ning Shu touched the flower, and a clear fragrance surrounded the tip of her nose. Ning Shu smiled happily. The big flower on her head climbed onto the stone man's shoulder and sat on it. Her legs dangled in the air. She raised her fist. Let's go. Let's find something to eat. The stone man moved slowly, but his speed wasn't slow. As long as his body was too big, his movements looked very slow. When he took a step, others couldn't catch up with him even if they took 100 steps. The scenery in the sky was really good. Ning Shu touched her body and started to familiarize herself with it. From now on, she had a body. Although this body was very weak, it was still a body. The stone man said that she was a void cub. That meant that she had turned from a chicken into a human. She had a human body. Even if she was weak, she could accept it. Now, she had to develop her body's strength. It seemed that she had a lot of strength. As for other strength, she could slowly explore it. Ning Shu looked at her own hands. They were small and fleshy. They were snow white. When she touched her face, it wasn't that kind of skin and bones, but slippery. Ning Shu was addicted to this kind of touch. She fell in love with herself and couldn't help herself. Following the stone man, Ning Shu ate a lot of things. There were fruits and also meat. However, the meat was bloody. Ning Shu didn't like to eat it, but the stone man didn't mind at all. Seeing that Ning Shu didn't eat these things, the stone man advised, it's not good to be picky. Your body is weak to begin with. Do you have the right to be picky? Ning Shu gnawed on the fruit. Yes, why don't I have the right to be picky? Things like qualifications, if you said you had it, then you had it. The stone man slowly shook his head and began to eat the bloody meat. Ning Shu felt that if it ate like this, it would cause a huge impact on her soul. She should get some fire and roast it. Ning Shu asked, where's the fire? Do you eat cooked food when you eat? The stone man, there's fire. There's the kind that can burn the meat to ashes. I'm used to eating like this. It's too troublesome to roast it bit by bit. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39-31. Ning Shu felt that the fruits she ate were quite good. Fruits had energy, and meat was also energy. They had the same energy, but the taste was different. Being forced to become a vegetarian, Ning Shu felt that the stone man had a great influence on her diet. There was a shallow stream next to the temporary stop. Ning Shu finished eating the fruits and washed her hands. More importantly, she wanted to see how she looked like. Ning Shu carefully moved closer. First, she opened one eye, and it seemed okay. Then, she opened the other eye and felt that she was really cute. She looked like a loli, with long braids on her head, one on each side, and a small skirt. Looking at herself, Ning Shu felt that her mentality had become younger, and all the weight on her body had disappeared. The tiredness and depression disappeared with her rebirth. This kind of wandering life, without knowing the passage of time, was carefree. She also met the simple and honest stone man, who didn't eat her like the other races. When she woke up, she encountered happy things. Since her rebirth, she had a happy life. No matter what she encountered in the future, she had to be beautiful and happy. This kind of healing made Ning Shu very happy. The environment here wasn't as high pressure and busy as the organization. Under that kind of atmosphere, people were under a lot of pressure. Everyone had to work hard to move forward. Only with a life could one have the right to talk about other things. Ning Shu madly made pictures of herself on the water's surface, taking pictures of herself from all angles. The stone man waited for a while, but she didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. He picked up Ning Shu with his giant stone hand, put her on his shoulder, and left. Ning Shu sat down on his broad shoulders and looked at the stream reluctantly. What she needed now was a clear mirror so that she could see her face clearly. After recovering from the joy of her rebirth, she calmed down a little and played comfortably. Ning Shu remembered that she seemed to be looking for Fa Tian. Now that she no longer had any mental connection with Fa Tian, all connections had been severed. Finding Fa Tian now depended on fate. How much fate did it take to meet him? After all, the void was so big, it was not easy to meet him. Ning Shu fiddled with her long ponytails that reached her waist as she asked the stone golem, "Where are we going now?" The big red flower on Ning Shu's head fell off. Ning Shu put the big red flower on his head again. The stone man asked in a muffled voice, "Where do you want to go?" Ning Shu was silent for a while before he said, "I want to go to the Holy Land." Going to the Holy Land was the most likely place to find Fa Tian. However, what Ning Shu wanted now was fate. He didn't want to force it. Perhaps Fa Tian would live a better life without him. To be honest, Fa Tian was quite unlucky to be with him. It would be great if they met, but if they didn't, then it just meant that they weren't fated enough. If I force myself too much, I'll become an inner demon. I want to be a happy person. The Holy Land? I've never heard of it, but what kind of place is it? Tell me. Ning Shu didn't plan to say. It was useless to say it. Perhaps Fa Tian wasn't in the Holy Land. Everyone in the organization knew that Fa Tian was a cub from the cub shelter, so they might go to the cub shelter. If Fa Tian was smart enough, he might not be in the Holy Land for the time being. Even if he went there, he wouldn't be able to find him. So, let's leave it to fate. If we don't go to the Holy Land, then let's go somewhere else. Now that the life spirit is about to bloom, let's go eat the nectar. It's sweet and very nutritious. Once you eat it, your body might be better, said the stone man. Ning Shu was very hungry when he heard about food. The feeling of being full was great. He nodded repeatedly. Okay, then let's go eat the nectar. After receiving Ning Shu's affirmation, the stone man turned in another direction and led Ning Shu to find the nectar. Ning Shu licked his lips and asked, "Is the nectar tasty?" Following the stone man, Ning Shu really ate a lot of fruits. It was much more varied than before. The stone man said, "It's delicious. I've eaten it a few times, but this kind of thing is too rare. The interval is very long. After eating it once, I can go without eating for a long time." Ning Shu's eyes lit up. This was probably what she needed. With such nourishment, it would definitely be able to nourish her weak body. However, the distance was really too far. Anyway, Ning Shu felt that they had walked a long way, but they also ate a lot along the way. Ning Shu felt that his stomach was full at any time. He didn't need to walk. He lay on the stone man's shoulder and sat down if it was uncomfortable. The flower on her head changed into a rainbow-colored flower. It was beautiful and smelled good. The stone man put it on her head. She was in a good mood every day. There were fresh flowers every day. It couldn't be better. Although he still coughed frequently, these small problems were not a problem at all. Of course, as a companion for so long, under the stone man's care, Ning Shu was getting fatter day by day. She also had to care about his situation. Ning Shu asked the stone man, "Have you always been alone?" The stone man said, "No, I also have Zhou Hongzhu. I just like to walk around. It's easy to get bored if I'm in one place. We are the divine stone race. We are born with strong defensive abilities." Ning Shu said, "Oh." It turned out that the stone man full of maternal instincts also had a race. He thought it was just one race. Of course, when talking about his own race, he couldn't help but talk about Ning Shu. The power that gave birth to you is really too weak. Not only do you not have a race, but your body is also so weak. Ning Shu sighed. It was a pity that the peerless martial arts were so weak now, but it still gave her a body. At this time, Ning Shu wouldn't despise this body for being weak. Otherwise, she would still be in a deep sleep, completely unconscious and unable to feel anything. As for her body, according to her current state of eating, she would definitely be able to recover. Ning Shu asked, "How much longer?" "It's been so long. Do you still remember where the nectar is?" "I remember the approximate location. I specially marked it. I just don't know if the living soul ran away this time. If it did, the approximate location wouldn't be accurate. It could run. Could it be a ginseng?" Ning Shu was looking forward to the nectar. When he reached the destination, he found that there were already many races waiting. There were all kinds of races. Some races appeared directly in their race form, and some races turned into human form. When the stone man appeared with his huge body, it attracted a lot of attention. When they saw the little girl on the stone man's shoulder, they all looked away. In their eyes, this cub was very weak. There were no energy fluctuations on her body. She could be blown to death by a breath. She was just that weak. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39-32. The soul of life was a very large plant with long leaves, like a narcissus that had been magnified many times. There were large buds on the flower path. The flowers had not bloomed yet, but the air was already filled with the fragrance of flowers and a sweet smell. It was very tempting. Ning Shu smelled this smell and felt that this nectar must be very delicious and fragrant. However, there were so many people, but not many buds. If it was divided equally, there would not be enough. She and the stone man would definitely not be able to get any. There was no other way. She could only take an unconventional approach. Perhaps she could get one. Such a large flower must have a lot of nectar. The flower was much bigger than a large water tank. There was an unknown amount of nectar inside. Ning Shu could not help but salivate. The current peace was because the soul of life had not bloomed yet. When the flower completely bloomed, this peaceful situation would be broken. It would depend on who was stronger. As time passed, more and more races appeared here. Ning Shu saw the person she did not want to see the most. Since her rebirth, or after waking up, she did not think about the past and did not think about the right and wrong. However, when she saw it, her heart still fluctuated. The grand uncle felt a very sharp gaze. He turned his head and saw Ning Shu sitting on the stone man. Ning Shu's current appearance was completely different from before. No matter how weak she was still a void creature. She was not the Ning Shu that could be crushed to death. She had an unchangeable physique. She was a chicken for life. Ning Shu's throat was itchy, and she coughed. The stone man raised his other hand and blocked Ning Shu on his shoulder. He looked at the grand uncle and asked, "What are you looking at?" "You're making the cub cough." Ning Shu, cough, 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 cough. The grand uncle withdrew his gaze. Even the divine stone race felt pain when they hit him. Ning Shu lowered her eyes to hide the coldness in her eyes. When she raised her head again, she was still a fragile cub that could be blown to death by a breath. Sooner or later, he would have to kill him. Didn't they say that sacrificing one person could save the general public? Sacrificing a small part to fulfill the majority's wish and kill the grand uncle. Without the grand uncle absorbing the power of the Sea of Law, the Sea of Law could last longer, the plane could last longer, and the organization could last longer. If she truly had the Sea of Law, and if she wanted grand uncle to die, she could consider diverting the flow. Wasn't it good to sacrifice the grand uncle to help everyone? If she went back in the future and told that organization and everyone that they could continue to live after the death of the grand uncle, the Sea of Law could still exist, the plane could still exist, and the mission enforcers who relied on the plane could also live. Who knew how many people wanted to make a move on the Grand Elder? Thinking about it, he really wanted to see that scene. Brother, the bigger picture is more important. Ning Shu was smiling on the surface, but in her heart, she thought that this person was very annoying. She hadn't been happy for long, and now she was reminded of some unhappy things. Thinking back, there weren't many happy moments in that organization. Just when he wanted to be happy about his achievement, he was slapped back by reality. He didn't want to think about it. It was meaningless to think too much. He couldn't be like before. The past was the past. The important thing was how to taste the honey now. As soon as the grand uncle appeared, many people were afraid. Previously, they were scattered, but now, there was a faint intention of joining forces to fight against him. The stone man whispered to Ning Shu, "Do you know him?" Ning Shu shook her head blankly. "I don't know him." "Who is he?" The stone man said, "He's lucky. Void creatures are born from void power. He was born in the birthplace of the plane, so he's very powerful." Ning Shu nodded and asked, "Don't the birthplaces of other planes give birth to creatures like him?" "They do, but the probability is small. The birthplaces of planes also have the instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. The birth of creatures means that the direct creatures will absorb more power. This kind of creature can cultivate and become stronger on its own. Moreover, there's a source of power to provide power. That was to fight for a while. He had always been powerful and had endless power. Ask the people who fought with him if they felt aggrieved. Ning Shu just said indifferently, "Is that so?" Endless power. Heh, I'm afraid the Sea of Law can no longer provide him with endless power. The stone man said to Ning Shu, "Don't provoke this kind of person. If there's no necessary conflict, don't provoke him if you can. Let's not talk about whether you can beat him or not." "So what if you can beat him?" Ning Shu said indifferently, "Of course, we'll fight if there's value. There will definitely be a conflict. If not, how can we eat the nectar?" Ning Shu whispered in the stone man's ear. The stone man couldn't help but ask, "Is this okay?" Ning Shu spread his hands and said, "Why not? How will we know if we don't try? If we can get the nectar, we'll benefit. If we don't succeed, we won't lose anything. Isn't that good?" The stone man hesitated and nodded. "Okay, but I don't think so. There are too many people here this time. Let's wait for the next time. I know a more secret place with life." Ning Shu said, "Since we're already here, we have to give it a try." They couldn't return empty-handed after climbing mountains and wading through rivers. Even if it was just to lick the flowers, it would be a wasted trip. The petals slowly bloomed one by one, and the sweetness and fragrance became stronger. Everyone stared at the soul flower, and the atmosphere became solemn. How to obtain the flower was a question that everyone was thinking about. The granduncle looked at the soul with a cold expression. The others looked at him from time to time. Finally, someone stood up and said to the granduncle, "It's boring to fight endlessly. Let's split these flowers." The granduncle looked up at him. "How do you want to split them?" The sweetness in the air was getting thicker and thicker. Those flowers were like awakened beauties, stretching their bodies and seducing people. "Split them according to strength. I don't want much. I want two." The race that spoke had long hair all over his body, and his facial features could not be seen clearly. Ning Shu stomped on the stone man's shoulder with his foot. The stone man immediately hammered the ground with his hands, and the huge force made the ground tremble twice. The races that were still in discussion all focused their gazes on the stone golem. "You're not giving me, Shan Yu, face. I'm standing here. Can't you see me?" "I want flowers too," the stone man said loudly. The divine stone race probably gave people the impression that they were simple and honest. Someone said, "You divine stone race don't like to eat these." Ning Shu raised his eyebrows. They didn't like to eat. He ate more than anyone else. Shan Yu objected without thinking. "I like to eat them. I want one." "No, I want 5. You won't object, right?" To watch the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39-33. 5 Flowers. Hee hee. No one paid any attention to the stone man. This guy was just daydreaming. They had to take him away the moment the flowers bloomed. Otherwise, the fragrance and sweetness would attract more races. By then, there would be no way to divide them. The scene would be even more chaotic. If they could solve it peacefully, they wouldn't bother to fight. Stone man Ning Shu comforted him. "It's okay. Wait a moment. When the time is up, it'll be a bull's charge." These people discussed the distribution among themselves. They threw the huge stone man aside and isolated him outside the communication circle. As a result, the stone man looked like a pitiful lump. Originally, the stone man wasn't a competitive existence. The flower had completely bloomed. Ning Shu looked at the flower and her saliva flowed down 3,000 feet because the center of the flower was filled with sticky nectar. That fragrance was enough to make people faint. No matter what, he had to get a taste. Because they had distributed it in advance, the scene looked very peaceful. Ning Shu coughed, and the stone golem stomped his feet and rushed into the crowd at lightning speed. "You guys just don't give me, mountain peak, face." He used his huge body to cause trouble so that these people couldn't pick the flowers immediately. It was the kind that was purely unreasonable. Ning Shu rolled in the mud and was covered in mud. He quickly ran to the life soul and used the opportunity that the stone man had bought for him. The stone man was very resistant to beatings. His defensive ability was very speechless. If you didn't hit him, he would be very close to you, making your hands and feet tied. However, it wasn't worth it to hit him. It was a waste of energy and didn't hurt him at all. Ning Shu approached the life soul and looked at it closely. He stood under the plant and was about to raise his head. The flowers were so big that he could eat the nectar of one flower for a long time. Ning Shu climbed up the life soul and wanted to break the flower path, pick one, and run. When the grand uncle saw the mud monkey Ning Shu crawling around the plant like a spider, he wanted to go over immediately. However, he was stopped by the stone man. Stone golem was the kind of existence that would make people angry if they didn't hit him. But if they didn't hit him, it would make people angry. He had to stop stone golem, which caused a little trouble for grand uncle. Ning Shu had no way to break the flower stalk. She even used her teeth to bite it. However, the flower stalk was thicker than 2 people. How long would it take to bite it with her teeth? With so many people, Stone Golem couldn't stop them. Ning Shu was anxious, so he grabbed the grass and pulled it out. In the end, he pulled out the entire plant. Uprooted. Ning Shu was stunned. His first reaction was that he had gone too far. He only wanted to pluck one flower, but he ended up plucking the entire flower. If he had a handy weapon in his hand, he could cut off the branches and run away with the flower in tow. It was acceptable for those people to lose a flower, but now that she had even taken away the pot, those who didn't gain anything had to chase after her. Ning Shu immediately reacted and carried the huge object on his shoulder. He looked like an ant carrying a 40-meter-long broadsword. Ning Shu shouted to the stone golem, "Hurry up and run." When the others saw Ning Shu uprooting the life soul, they were stunned for a moment. Then, they swarmed towards Ning Shu, wanting to take it back. Stone Golem ran at the front, picked up Ning Shu, put her on his shoulder, and began to run. Stone Golem's voice drifted in the wind and was somewhat inaudible. "Why did you uproot it? Didn't you just get one flower?" Ning Shu said, "I don't know. Who cares? Hurry up and run." The black mass of people chased after them. A huge hand stretched out very quickly. It was about to cover Ning Shu and Stone Golem. Ning Shu saw this huge hand, and a cold killing intent appeared in her eyes. She put down the spirit of life on her shoulder and let Stone Golem carry it. Ning Shu clenched her fists. She had a rough idea of her strength. She jumped up and shot toward the huge hand like a cannonball. She was like a mosquito rushing toward a cannon. Ning Shu clenched her fists and collided with the huge hand. Time seemed to stop. In the next second, a powerful sound wave exploded from the point of contact. The huge hand broke inch by inch like glass and disappeared. The Grand Elder's face was cold. Soon, a huge hand condensed again, trying to catch Ning Shu. Ning Shu secretly shook her hand. It hurt a little, but other than that, there was no other effect. If she was in her previous state, she would have been crushed to death by this huge hand. Ning Shu clenched her fists and punched the huge hand like the wind. The power condensed in the huge hand was scattered by Ning Shu. She jumped back onto Stone Golem's shoulder and shouted to the black mass of people behind her, "I'm new here. I don't know how to talk or do things. If I offend you, you can come and beat me." Cough, cough, cough. Ning Shu looked at the Grand Elder in the black windbreaker and pointed at him. "I'll come and find you sooner or later. I'll teach you a lesson." Stone Golem ran quickly and disappeared. No one could have imagined that such a huge and clumsy body could run so fast. Usually, the stone golems were slow and unhurried. Everyone was a little confused. Now that the spirit of life had been uprooted, they could only smell a scent. Many people were unwilling to give up and chased in the direction it disappeared. The Grand Elder stood still and looked in that direction with a frown. That was the cub of the Divine Stone Clan. It was very hostile to him. He could feel a murderous intent and hostility from it. Its attack was also very fierce. The Grand Elder narrowed his eyes and immediately put this matter to the back of his mind. He started to track it according to the marks left before. It was easier than those who followed blindly. Ning Shu sat on the stone golem's shoulder, one hand holding the other. That hand was red and swollen, red and swollen. Ning Shu's eyes were filled with tears. "It hurts. My hand is broken." Stone Golem, it was a little speechless. Ning Shu mourned his hand and began to look around for something. Stone Golem asked, "What are you looking for?" "I'm looking for a mark on you, me, and the spirit of life. If there is a mark, we will be found no matter where we run." According to Ning Shu's understanding of the Grand Elder and the organization, since the Grand Elder had come in person, it meant that he valued the spirit of life very much. He wouldn't give up so easily. The Grand Elder and the others were people who took one step forward and had absolute strength. They thought that the spirit of life was their own. It was normal to mark it in advance like a dog peeing. Stone Golem didn't speak. He felt that she knew that person, but she was indeed a cub that had just been born. Ning Shu looked for the mark inch by inch. Finally, he found a very small mark under a leaf of the spirit of life. If he didn't look carefully, he wouldn't have found it at all. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile phone address. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.